Jack Dunkirk, like Phillies herself, was changed within a month. Somehow the fun and carelessness which struck Gilead Beck as so remarkable in a man of 25 were a good deal damped. For the first time in his life he was serious. For the first time he had a serious and definite object before him. He was perfectly serious in an unbounded love for Phillies. Day by day the sweet beauty of the girl, her grace, her simple faith, her childlike affection, sank into his heart and softened him. Day after day as he rode along the meadows of the Thames, or lazied under the hanging willows by the shore, or sat with her in the garden, or rode along the leafy roads by her side, the sincerity of her nature, as clear and cloudless as the blue depths of heaven, its purity, like the bright water that leaps and bubbles and flows beneath the shade of Lebanon, its perfect truthfulness like the midday sunshine in June, the innocence with which, even as another Eve, she bared her very soul for him to read, these things, when he thought of them, brought the unaccustomed tears to his eyes, and made his spirit rise and bound within him as to unheard of heights. For love to an honest man is like nature to a poet or colour to an artist. It makes him see great depths, and gives him, if only for once in his life, a pisca view of a land far, far holier, a life far, far higher, a condition far, far sweeter and nobler than anything in this world can give us except the love of a good woman. In such a vision the ordinary course of our life is suspended. We move on air, we see men as trees walking and regard them not. Happy the man who once in his life has been so lifted out of the present, and knows not afterwards whether he was in the flesh or out of the flesh. Jack, with the influence of this great passion upon him, was transformed. Fortunately for us this emotion had its ebb and flow, else that great dinner to literature had never come off, but at all times he was under its sobering influence, and it was in a penitent and humble mood that he sought Lawrence Culquehown, in the hope of squaring it with him as lads advised. Good fellow Tommy, none better, but wanting in the higher delicacy. Somehow the common words and phrases of everyday use applied to Phillies jarred upon him. After all, one feels a difficulty in offering a princess the change for a shilling in coppers. If I had to do it, I should fall back on a draft upon the cheque bank. Lawrence was full of his own annoyances, most of us always are, and it is one of the less understood ills of life that one can never get, even for 5 minutes, a monopoly of complaint. But he listened patiently while Jack of the rueful countenance, poured out his tale of repentance, woe and prayer. You see, he said, winding up, I never thought what it would come to. I dropped into it by accident and then. When people come to flirt they stay to spoon, said Lawrence. In other words, my dear fellow, you are in love. Ah. Jack wondered what was meant by the interjection. In all the list of interjections given by Lindley Mary, or the new light Dr. Maurice, such as pish, for, alas, humph, and the rest which are in everybody's mouth, there is none which blows with such an uncertain sound as this. Impossible to tell whether it means encouragement, sympathy, or cold distrust. Ah, said Lawrence, sit down and be comfortable, Jack. When one is really worried, nothing like a perfect chair. Take my own. Now then, let us talk it over. It doesn't look well, thought Jack. Always face the situation, said Lawrence. He had got an uncommonly awkward situation of his own to face, and it was a little relief to turn to someone else's. Nothing done by blinking facts. Here we are, young lady of 18 or so, just released from a convent, ignorant of the world, pretty, attractive ways, rich as girls go on the one hand. On the other, you, good-looking, as my cousin Agatha L. Estrange says, though I can't see it, of a cheerful disposition, aptus ludia, fit to play cum puella all the day. Don't chaff, Culquehown, it's too serious. But Culquehown went on. An inflammable young man. Well, with any other girl the danger would have been seen at once. Poor Phillies is so innocent that she is supposed to be quite safe. So you go on calling. My cousin Agatha writes me word that she has been looking for the light of love, as she calls it, in Phillies's eyes, and it isn't there. She is a sentimentalist and therefore silly. Why didn't she look in your eyes, Jack? That would have been very much more to the purpose. She has now. I told her yesterday that I loved Phillies. Did she ask you to take the young lady's hand and a blessing at once? Come, Jack, look at the thing sensibly. There are 2 or 3 very strong reasons why it can't be. Why it can't be, echoed Jack dolefully. First, the girl hasn't come out. Now I ask you, would it not be simply sinful not to give her a fair run? In any case you could not be engaged till after she has had 1 season. Then her father, who did not forget that he was grandson of a peer, wanted his daughter to make a good match, and always spoke of the fortune he was to leave her as a guarantee that she would marry well. He never thought he was going to die, of course, but all events I know so much of his wishes. Lastly, my dear Jack Dunkirk, You are the best fellow in the world, but you know, but I am not Lord Isleworth. That is just it. You are his lordship's younger brother with 1 or 2 between you and the title. Now don't you see, need we talk about it any more? I suppose Phil, I mean Miss Fleming, will be allowed to choose for herself. You are not going to make her marry a man because he happens to have a title and an estate and offers himself. I suppose, said Lawrence laughing, that I am going to lock Phyllis up in a tower until the right man comes. No, no, Jack, there shall be no compulsion. If she sets her heart upon marrying you, she is a downright young lady, why she must do it. But after she has had her run among the ballrooms, not before. Let her take a look round first. There will be other Jack Dunkirks ready to look at, be sure of that. Perhaps she will think them fairer to outward view than you. If she does, you will have to give her up in the end, you know. I have said no word of love to her, Colquhoun, I give you my honour, said Jack hotly. I don't think she would understand it if I did. I am glad of that at least. If I am to give her up and go away, I dare say, the poor youth went on with a little choking in his throat, that she will regret me at first and for a day or 2. But she will get over that, and as you say, there are plenty of fellows in the world better than myself, and… My dear Jack, there will be no going away. You tell me you have not told her all the effect that her beaux you have produced upon you. Well then, and there has been nothing to compromise her at all. Nothing, that is, once we went to the tower in a hansom cab. Oh, that is all, is it, Jack Dunkirk, Jack Dunkirk. And we have been up the river a good many times in a boat. I see, the river is pleasant at this time of the year. And we have been riding together a good deal. Phil rides very well, you know. Does she? It seems to me, Jack, that my cousin Agatha is a fool, and that you have been having rather a high time in consequence. Surely you can't complain if I ask you to consider the innings over for the present. No, I can't complain if one may hope. Let us hope nothing, sufficient for the day. He who hopes nothing gets everything. Come out of it at once, Jack, before you get hit too hard. I think no one was ever hit so hard before, said Jack. Colquhoun, you don't know your ward. It is impossible for anyone to be with her without falling in love with her. She is… Here he stopped, because he could not go any farther. Anybody who did not know the manly nature of Jack Dunkirk might have thought he was stopped by emotion. We all get the fever some time or other, but we worry through. Look at me, Jack, I am 40, and as you see, a comparatively hale and hearty man despite my years. It doesn't shorten life, that kind of fever. It doesn't take away appetite. It doesn't interfere with your powers of enjoyment. There is even a luxury about it. You can't remember Geraldine Arundel, now Lady Newladig, when she came out, of course. You were getting ready for Eton about that time. Well, she and I carried on for a whole season. People talked. Then she got engaged to her present husband, after seeing him twice. She wanted a title, you see. I was very bad that journey, and I remember that Agatha, who was in my confidence, had a hot time of it over the faithlessness of shallow hearts. But I got over the attack, and I have not been dangerously ill, so to speak, since. That is, I have made a contemptible ass of myself on several occasions, and I dare say I shall go on making an ass of myself as long as I live. Because the older you grow, somehow, the sweeter do the flowers smell. Jack only groaned. It really is no kind of consolation to tell a suffering man that you have gone through it yourself. Gilead Beck told me once of a man who lived in one of the southern states of America. He was a mild and placid creature, inoffensive as a canary bird, quiet as a mongoose, and much esteemed for his unusual meekness. This harmless being once got earache, very bad earache. Boyhood's earaches are awful things to remember, but those of manhood, when they do come, which is seldom, are the devil. To him in agony came a friend, who sat down beside him, like Eliphaz the Temanite, and sighed. This the harmless being who had the earache put up with, though it was irritating. Presently the friend began to relate how he once had the earache himself. Then the harmless creature rose up suddenly, and seizing an adjacent chunk of wood, gave that friend a token of friendship on the head with such effect that he ceased the telling of that and all other stories, and has remained quite dumb ever since. The jury acquitted that inoffensive and meek creature, who wept when the earache was gone, and often laid flowers on the grave of his departed friend. Jack did not heave chunks of wood at Colquhoun, he only looked at him with ineffable contempt. Lady Newladig, why, she's 35 and she's fat. She wasn't always 35, nor was she always fat. On the contrary, when she was 20 and I was in love with her, she was slender, and if one may so speak of a peeress, she was cuddlesome. Cuddlesome, Jack cried, his deepest feelings outraged. Good heavens, to think of comparing Phil with a woman who was once cuddlesome. Lawrence Colquhoun laughed. In 15 years or thereabouts, perhaps you will take much the same view of things as I do. Meantime, Jack, let things remain as they are. You shall have a fair chance with the rest, and you must remember that you have had a much better chance than anybody else because you have had the first running. Leave off going to Twickenham quite so much, but don't stop going altogether, or Phillies may be led to suspect. Can't you contrive to slack off by degrees? Jack breathed a little more freely. The house then was not shut to him. The young lady will have her first season next year. I don't say I hope she will marry anybody else, Jack, but I am bound to give her the chance. As soon as she really understands a little more of life, she will find out for herself what is best for her, perhaps. Now we've talked enough about it. Jack Dunkirk went away sorrowful. He expected some such result of this endeavour to square it with Colquhoun, but yet he was disappointed. Hang it all, Jack, said lads, what can you want more? You are told to wait a year. No one will step in between you and the young lady till she comes out. You are not told to discontinue your visits, only not to go too often and not to compromise her. What more does the man want? You are a very good fellow, Tommy, sighed the lover. A very good fellow in the main, but you see you don't know Phil. Let me call her Phil to you, old man. There's not another man in the world that I could talk about her to, not one, by Jove, it would seem a desecration. Go on, Jack, talk away, and I'll give you good advice. He did talk away. What says Solomon? Ointment and perfume rejoice the soul, so doth the sweetness of a man's friend by hearty counsel. The wise man might have expressed himself more clearly, but his meaning can be made out. Meantime Lawrence Colquhoun, pulling himself together after Jack went away, remembered that he had not once gone near his ward since he drove her to Twickenham. It is too bad, said Conscience, a whole month. It is all that woman's fault, he pleaded. I have been dangling about in obedience to her like a fool. Like a fool, echoed Conscience. He went that very day, and was easily persuaded to stay and dine with the two ladies. He said very little, but Agatha observed him watching his ward closely. After dinner she got a chance. It was a pleasant evening, early in June. They had strawberries on a garden table. Phillies presently grew tired of sitting under the shade, and strolled down to the riverside, where she sat on the grass and threw biscuits to the swans. What do you think, Lawrence? He was watching her in silence. I don't understand it, Agatha. What have you done to her? Nothing, are you pleased? You are a witch, I believe you must have a familiar somewhere. She is wonderful, wonderful. Is she a ward to be proud of and to love, Lawrence? Is she the sweetest and prettiest girl you ever saw? My dear cousin, I declare to you that I think her faultless. At least her very faults are attractive. She is impetuous and self-willed, but she is full of sympathy. And that seems to have grown up in her altogether in the last few months. Her manner appears to be more perfect than anything I have ever seen. It is because she has no self-consciousness. She is like a child still, my dear Phillies, so far. I wonder if it is because she cannot read. Why should we not prohibit the whole sex from learning to read? Nonsense, Lawrence, what would the novelists do? Besides, she is learning to read fast. I put her this morning into the 3rd lesson book, 2 syllables, and it is not as if she were ignorant because she knows a great deal. Then why is it? I think her sweet nature has something to do with it, and besides she has been shielded from many bad influences. We send girls to school and, well, Lawrence, we cannot all be angels any more than men. If girls learn about love and establishments and flirtations and the rest of it, why, they naturally want their share of these good things. Then they get self-conscious. What about Jack Dunkirk? Asked Lawrence abruptly. He has been to me about her. Agatha blushed as prettily as any self-conscious young girl. He loves Phillies, she said, but Phillies only regards him as a brother. Agatha, you are no wiser than Little Red Riding Hood. Jack Dunkirk is a wolf. I am sure he is a most honourable, good young man. As for good, goodness knows. Honourable, no doubt, and a wolf. You are a matchmaker, you bad, bad woman. I believe you want him to marry that young princess over there. And what did you tell poor Jack? Told him to wait, acted the stern guardian. Won't have an engagement, must let Phillies have her run, mustn't come here perpetually trying to gobble up my dainty heiress. Think upon that now, cousin Agatha. She could not marry into a better family. Very true, the Dunkirks had an ark of their own, I believe, at the deluge. But then Jack is not Lord Isleworth, and he isn't ambitious, and he isn't clever, and he isn't rich. Go on, Lawrence, it is charming to see you in a new character, Lawrence the prudent. Charmed to charm, la belle cousin. He is in love and he is hit as hard as any man I ever saw, but Phillies shall not be snapped up in this hasty and inconsiderate manner. There are lots of better parties in the field. Then Phillies came back, dangling her hat by its ribbons. The setting sun made a glory of her hair, lit up the splendor of her eyes, and made a clear outline of her delicate features and tall, shapely figure. "Come and sit by me, Phillies," said her guardian. "I have neglected you. Agatha will tell you that I am a worthless youth of 40 who neglects all his duties. You are so much improved, my child, that I hardly knew you, prettier and everything. How goes on the education?" "Reading and writing," said Phillies, "do not make education. Really, Lawrence, you ought to know better. A year or two with Mr. Dyson would have done you much good. I am in words of 2 syllables, and Agatha thinks I am getting on very nicely. I am in despair about my painting since we have been to picture galleries, and to think how conceited I was once over it. But I can draw, Lawrence, I shall not give up my drawing." "And you liked your galleries?" "Some of them. The academy was tiring. Why don't they put all the portraits in one room together, so that we need not waste time over them?" "What did you look at?" "I looked at what all the other people pressed to see first of all. There was a picture of Waterloo, with the French and English crowded together so that they could shake hands. It was drawn beautifully, but somehow it made me feel as if war was a little thing. Mr. Dyson used to say that women take the grandeur and strength out of art. Then there was a brown man with a sling on a platform. The platform rested on stalks of corn, and if the man were to throw the stone he would topple over and tumble off his platform. And there was another one, of a row of women going to be sold for slaves. A curious picture and beautifully painted, but I did not like it." "What did you like?" "I liked some that told their own story and made me think. There was a picture of a moor. Take me to see a moor, Lawrence, with a windy sky and a wooden fence and a light upon. Oh, I liked all the landscapes. I think our artists feel trees and sunshine. But what is my opinion worth? Come with me tomorrow, Phillies. We will go through the pictures together, and you shall teach me what to like. Your opinion worth? Why, child, all the opinions of all the critics together are not worth yours." Chapter 36. What is it that has been done? These anonymous letters and this fit of jealousy, the more dangerous because it was a new thing, came at an awkward time for Gabriel Cassilis. He had got bigger things in hand, and the eyes of the city, he felt, were on him. It was all important that he should keep his clearness of vision and unclouded activity of brain. For the first time in his life his operations equalled, or nearly approached, his ambition. For the first time he had what he called a considerable sum in his hands, that is to say, there was his own money. He was reported to be worth £300,000, Gilead Beck's little pile with his unlimited credit, and smaller sums placed in his hands for investment by private friends, such as Colquhoun, Lads and others. A total which enabled him to wait, and the share market oscillating, and telegrams in cipher reaching him from all quarters. And Gabriel Cassilis unable to work, tormented by the one thought, like Io by her gadfly, attacked by fits of giddiness which made him cling to the arms of his chair, and relying on a brain which was active indeed, because it was filled with a never-ending succession of pictures, in which his wife and Colquhoun always formed the principal figures, but which refused steady work. Gabriel Cassilis was a gamester who played to win. His game was not the roulette table, where the bank holds 1 chance out of 30, and must win in the long run. It was a game in which he staked his foresight, knowledge of events, financial connections, and calm judgment against greed, panic, enthusiasm, and ignorance. It was his business to be prepared against any turn of the tide. He would have stood calmly in the Rue Quincampoix, buying in and selling out up to an hour before the smash, and that would have found him without a single share in Law's great scheme. A great game, but a difficult one. It requires many qualities, and when you have got these, it requires a steady watchfulness and attention to the smallest cloud appearing on the horizon. There were many clouds on the horizon. His grand coup was to be in El Dorado stock. Thanks to Mr. Wiley's pamphlet they went down, and Gabriel Cassilis bought all he could, and the stock went up. There was a fortnight before settling day. They went up higher, and yet higher. El Senor Don Belaco de la Carambola, minister of the El Dorado Republic at St. James's, wrote a strong letter to the daily papers in reply to Mr. Wiley's pamphlet. He called attention to the enormous advance made in the state. As no one had seen the place, it was quite safe to speak of buildings, banks, commercial prosperity, and openings up. It appeared, indeed, from his letter that the time of universal wealth, long looked for by mankind, was actually arrived for El Dorado. The stock went higher. Half the country clergy who had a few hundreds in the bank wanted to put them in El Dorado stock. Still Gabriel Cassilis made no move but held on. And every day to get another of those accursed letters, with some new fact. Every day to groan under fresh torture of suspicion. Every day to go home and dine with the calm cold creature whose beauty had been his pride, and try to think that this impassive woman could be faithless. This torture lasted for weeks. It began when Colquhoun first went to his house, and continued through May into June. His mental sufferings were so great that his speech became affected. He found himself saying wrong words, or not being able to hit upon the right word at all. So he grew silent. When he returned home, which was now early, he hovered about the house. Or he crept up to his nursery and played with his year-old child. And the nurses noticed how, while he laughed and crowed to please the baby, the tears came into his eyes. The letters grew more savage. He would take them out and look at them. Some of the sentences burned into his brain like fire. As Mr. Lawrence Colquhoun is the only man she ever loved, ask her for the secret. They think no one knows it. Does she care for the child, your child? Ask Tomlinson how often she sees it. When you go to your office, Mr. Colquhoun comes to your house. When you come home, he goes out of it. Then they meet somewhere else. Ask him for the secret, then ask her and compare what they say. 5 years ago, Mr. Lawrence Colquhoun and Miss Pengelly were going to be married. Everybody said so. She went to Scotland. He went after her. Ask him why. You are an old fool with a young wife. She loves your money, not you. She despises you because you are a city man, and she loves Mr. Colquhoun. He sat alone in his study after dinner, reading these wretched things in misery of soul, and a thought came across him. I will go and see Colquhoun, he said. I will talk to him and ask him what is this secret. It was about 10 o'clock. He put on his hat and took a cab to Colquhoun's chambers. On that day Lawrence Colquhoun was ill at ease. It was borne in upon him with a special force, probably because it was one of the sultry and thunderous days when conscience has it all her own disagreeable way, that he was, and had been an enormous ass. By some accident he was acquainted with the fact that he had given rise to talk by his frequent visits to Victoria Cassilis. And to think, he said to himself, that I only went there at her own special request, and because she likes quarrelling. He began to think of possible dangers, not to himself, but to her and to her husband, even old stories revived and things forgotten and brought to light. And the thing which she had done came before him in its real shape and ghastliness, a bad and ugly thing, a thing for whose sake he should have fled from her presence and avoided her, a thing which he was guilty in hiding, no possible danger to himself, well, in some sense none, in every other sense all dangers. He had known of this thing, and yet he sat at her table. He was conscious of the crime, and yet he was seen with her in public places. He was almost particeps criminis because he did not tell what he knew, and yet he went day after day to her house for the pleasure of quarrelling with her. He sat down and wrote to her. He told her that perhaps she did not wholly understand him when he told her that the renewed acquaintance between them must cease, that, considering the past, and with an eye to the future, he was going to put it out of her power to compromise herself by seeing her no more. He reminded her that she had a great secret to keep unknown, and a great position to lose, and then he begged her to give up her wild attempts at renewing the old ties of friendship. The letter, considering what the secret really was, seemed a wretched mockery to the writer, but he signed it and sent it by his servant. Then he strolled to his club and read the papers before dinner. But he was not easy. There was upon him the weight of impending misfortune. He dined and tried to drown care in claret, but with poor success. Then he issued forth. It was 9 o'clock and still light, and walked gently homewards. He walked so slowly that it was 9:30 when he let himself into his chambers in the Albany. His servant was out, and the rooms looked dismal and lonely. They were not dismal, being on the second floor, where it is light and airy, and being furnished as medieval bachelorhood with plenty of money alone understands furniture. But he was nervous tonight, and grim stories came into his mind of spectres and strange visitors to lonely men in chambers. Such things happen mostly, he remembered, on twilight evenings in midsummer. He was quite right. The only ghost I ever saw myself was in one of the Inns of Court, in chambers, at 9 o'clock on a June evening. He made haste to light a lamp. No such abomination as gas was permitted in Lawrence Colquhoun's chambers. It was one of the silver reading lamps, good for small tables, and provided with a green shade, so that the light might fall in a bright circle, which was Cimmerian blackness shading off into the sepia of twilight. It was his habit, too, to have lighted candles on the mantelshelf and on a table, but tonight he forgot them so that, except for the light cast upwards by the gas in the court and an opposite window illuminated, and for the half-darkness of the June evening, the room was dark. It was very quiet, too. There was no footsteps in the court below, and no voices or steps in the room near him. His nearest neighbour, young Lord Orlibar, would certainly not be home much before 1 or 2, when he might return with a few friends connected with the twin services of the army and the ballet for a little cheerful supper. Below him was old Sir Richard de Counterpane, who was by this time certainly in bed, and perhaps sound asleep. Very quiet. He had never known it more quiet, and he began to feel as if it would be a relief to his nerves were something or somebody to make a little noise. He took a novel, one that he had begun a week ago. Whether the novel of the day is inferior to the novel of Colquhoun's youth, or whether he was a bad reader of fiction, certainly he had been more than a week over the first volume alone. Now it interested him less than ever. He threw it away and lit a cigar, and then his thoughts went back to Victoria. What was the devil which possessed the woman that she could not rest quiet? What was the meaning of this madness upon her? A cold and arctic woman, Lawrence murmured. Cold when I told her how much I loved her, cold when she engaged herself to me, cold in her crime, and yet she follows me about as if she was devoured by the ardour of love like another Sappho. It was not that Lawrence Colquhoun, it was the spret injuria form, the jealousy and hatred caused by the lost power. I wish, he said, starting to his feet and walking like the polar bear across his den and back again, I wish to heaven I had gone on living in the Empire City with my pair of villainous Chinamen. At least I was free from her over there, and when I saw her marriage, by gad, I thought it was a finisher. Then I came home again. He stopped in his retrospection, because he heard a foot upon the stairs. A woman's foot, a light step and a quick step. Maybe de Counterpane's nurse, too early for one of young Orlibar's friends, can't be anybody for me. But it was, and a woman stopped at his doorway and seeing him alone stepped in. She had a hooded cloak thrown about an evening dress. The hood was drawn completely over her face so that you could see nothing of it in the dim light, and she came in without a word. Then Colquhoun, who was no coward, felt his blood run cold, because he knew by her figure and by her step that it was Victoria Casserly's. She threw back the hood with a gesture almost theatrical, and stood before him with parted lips and flashing eyes. His spirits rallied a little then, because he saw that her face was white, and that she was in a royal rage. Lawrence Colquhoun could tackle a woman in a rage. That is indeed elementary, and nothing at all to be proud of. The really difficult thing is to tackle a woman in tears and distress. The stoutest heart quails before such an enterprise. What is this? She began with a rush as of the liberated whirlwind. What does this letter mean, Lawrence? Exactly what it says, Mrs. Casserly's. May I ask, is it customary for married ladies to visit single gentlemen in their chambers, and at night? It is not usual for married ladies to visit single gentlemen, Lawrence. Do not ask foolish questions. Tell me what this means, I say. It means that my visits to your house have been too frequent, and that they will be discontinued. In other words, Mrs. Casserly's, the thing has gone too far and I shall cease to be seen with you. I suppose you know that people will talk. Let them talk. What do I care how people talk? Lawrence, if you think that I am going to let you go like this, you are mistaken. I believe this poor lady has gone mad, said Lawrence quietly. It was not the best way to quiet and soothe her, but he could not help himself. You think you are going to play fast and loose with me twice in my life, and you are mistaken. You shall not. Years ago you showed me what you are, cold, treacherous and crafty. Go on, Victoria. I like that kind of thing because now I know that you are not mad, quite in your best style. And I forgave you when you returned, and allowed you once more to visit me. What other woman would have acted so to such a man? Yet she must be mad, said Lawrence. How else could she talk such frightful rubbish? Once more we have been friends. Again you have drawn me on until I have learned to look to you for the second time for the appreciation denied to me by Mr. Casserly's. No, sir, this second desertion must not and shall not be. One would think, said Lawrence helplessly, that we had not quarrelled every time we met. Now, Mrs. Casserly's, you have my resolution. What you please in your sweet romantic way to call second desertion must be and shall be. Then I will know the reason why. I have told you the reason why. Don't be a fool, Mrs. Casserly's. Ask yourself what you want. Do you want me to run away with you? I am a lazy man, I know, and I generally do what people ask me to do, but as for that thing I am damned if I do it. Insult me, Lawrence, she cried, sinking into a chair. Swear at me as you will. Do you wish me to philander about your house like a ridiculous tame cat, till all the world cries out? She started to her feet. No, she cried. I care nothing about your coming and going, but I know why, oh, I know why. You make up this lame excuse about my good name, as if you cared about that. More than you cared about it yourself, he retorted, but pray go on. It is Phyllis Fleming, I saw it from the very first. You began by taking her away from me and placing her with your cousin, where you could have her completely under your own influence. You let Jack Dunkirk hang about her at first, just to show the ignorant creature what was meant by flirtation, and then you send him about his business. Lawrence, you are more wicked than I thought you. Jealousy, by gad, he cried. Did ever mortal man hear of such a thing, jealousy, and after all that she has done? I warn you, you may do a good many things. You may deceive and insult me in any way except one, but you shall never, never marry Phyllis Fleming. Colquhoun was about to reply that he never thought of marrying Phyllis Fleming, but it occurred to him that there was no reason for making that assertion, so he replied nothing. I escaped, she said, under pretence of being ill, and I made them fetch me a cab to come away in. My cab is at the Burlington Gardens end of the court now. Before I go you shall make me a promise, Lawrence, you used to keep your promises, to act as if this miserable letter had not been written. I shall promise nothing of the kind. Then remember, Lawrence, you shall never marry Phyllis Fleming, not if I have to stop it by proclaiming my own disgrace. You shall not marry that girl or any other girl. I have that power over you at any rate. Now I shall go. There is someone on the stairs, said Lawrence quietly. Perhaps he is coming here. You had better not be seen, best go into the other room and wait. There was only one objection to her waiting in the other room, and that was that the door was on the opposite side, that the outer oak was wide open, that the step upon the stairs was already the step upon the landing, and that the owner of the step was already entering the room. Mrs. Cassilis instinctively shrank back into the darkest corner, that near the window. The curtains were of some light-coloured stuff. She drew them closely round her and cowered down, covering her head with the hood, like Guinevere before her injured lord. For the late caller was no other than her own husband, Gabriel Cassilis. As he stood in the doorway, the light of the reading lamp, Mrs. Cassilis, in one of her gestures, had tilted up the shade, fell upon his pale face and stooping form. Colquhoun noticed that he stooped more than usual, and that his grave face bore an anxious look, such a look as one sees sometimes in the faces of men who have long suffered grievous bodily pain. He hesitated for a moment, tapping his knuckles with his double eyeglasses, his habitual gesture. I came up this evening, Colquhoun. Are you quite alone? As you see, Mr. Cassilis, said Colquhoun. He looked hastily round the room. In the corner he saw the dim outline of the crouching form. He adjusted the shade and turned the lamp a little lower. The gas in the chambers on the other side of the narrow court was put out, and the room was almost dark. As you see, Mr. Cassilis, and what gives me the pleasure of this late call from you? I thought I would come. I came to say— He stopped helplessly and threw himself into a chair. It was a chair standing near the corner in which his wife was crouching, and he pushed it back until he might have heard her breathing close to his ear, and if he had put forth his hand might have touched her. Glad to see you always, Mr. Cassilis. You came to speak about some money matters. I have an engagement in 5 minutes, but we shall have time, I dare say. An engagement? Ah, a lady, perhaps. This with a forced laugh because he was thinking of his wife. A lady, yes, a lady. Young men, said Gabriel Cassilis. Well, I will not keep you. I came here to speak to you about my wife. Oh Lord, cried Lawrence, I beg your pardon about Mrs. Cassilis. Yes, it is a very stupid business. You have known her for a long time. I have, Mr. Cassilis, for nearly 8 years. Ah, old friends, and once I believe people thought. Once, Mr. Cassilis, I myself thought. I cannot tell you what I thought Victoria Pengelly might be to me, but that is over long since. One for her, thought Lawrence, whose nerves were steady in danger. His 2 listeners trembled and shook, but from different causes. Over long since, repeated Gabriel Cassilis. There was nothing in it then. We were 2 persons entirely dissimilar in disposition, Mr. Cassilis, Lawrence replied evasively. Perhaps I was not worthy of her calm, clear judgment. Another for her, he thought with a chuckle. The situation would have pleased him but that he felt sorry for the poor man. Victoria is outwardly cold, yet capable of the deepest emotions. It is on her account, Colquhoun, that I come here. Foolish gossip has been at work, connecting your names. I think it the best thing without saying anything to Victoria, who must never suspect. Never suspect, echoed Colquhoun. that I ever heard this absurdity. But we must guard her from calumny, Colquhoun, Caesar's wife, you know, and I think that perhaps if you were to be a little less frequent in your calls, and— I quite understand, Mr. Cassilis, and I am not in the least offended. I assure you most sincerely, I wish Mrs. Cassilis were here to listen, that I am deeply sorry for having innocently put you to the pain of saying this. However, the world shall have no further cause of gossip. No motion or sign from the dark corner where the hiding woman crouched. Mr. Cassilis rose and tapped his knuckles with his glasses. Thank you, Colquhoun. It is good of you to take this most unusual request so kindly. With such a wife as mine, jealousy would be absurd, but I have to keep her name from even a breath, even a breath. Quite right, Mr. Cassilis. He looked round the room. Snug quarters for a bachelor. Ah, I lived in lodgings always myself. I thought I heard a woman's voice as I came upstairs. From Sir Richard de Counterpane's rooms downstairs, perhaps. His nurses, I suppose. The poor old man is getting infirm. Aye, and your bedroom is there, I suppose. Lawrence took the lamp and opened the door. It was a bare, badly furnished room, with a little camp bedstead and nothing else hardly, for Lawrence kept his luxurious habits for the day. Was it pure curiosity that made Gabriel Cassilis look all round the room? Ah, hermit-like, now I like a large bed. However, I am very glad I came. One word, Colquhoun, is better than 1,000 letters, and you are sure you do not misunderstand me? Quite, said Lawrence, taking his hat. I am going out too. No jealousy at all, said Gabriel Cassilis, going down the stairs. Certainly not. Nothing but a desire to. I understand perfectly, said Lawrence. As they descended, Lawrence heard steps on the stairs behind them. They were not yet, then, out of danger. Very odd, said Mr. Cassilis. Coming up I heard a woman's voice. Now it seems as if there were a woman's feet. Nerves, perhaps, said Colquhoun. The steps above them stopped. I hear nothing. Nor do I. Nerves. Ah, yes, nerves. Mr. Cassilis turned to the left, Colquhoun with him. Behind them he saw the cloaked and hooded figure of Victoria Cassilis. At the Burlington Gardens end, a cab was waiting. Near the horse's head stood a woman's figure which Lawrence thought he knew. As they passed her, this woman, whoever she was, covered her face with a handkerchief, and at the same moment the cab drove by rapidly. Gabriel Cassilis saw neither woman nor cab. He was too happy to notice anything. There was nothing in it, nothing at all except mischievous gossip, and he had laid the ghost. Dear me, he said to himself presently, I forgot to ask about the secret, but of course there is none, how should there be? Next morning there came another letter. You have been fooled worse than ever, it said. Your wife was in Mr. Colquhoun's chambers the whole time that you were there. She came down the stairs after you, she passed through the gate, almost touching you, and she drove past you in a hansom cab. I know the number and will give it to you when the time comes. Mr. Colquhoun lied to you. How long, how long? It should have been a busy day in the city. To begin with, it only wanted 4 days to settling day. Telegrams and letters poured in, and they lay unopened on the desk at which Gabriel Cassilis sat, with this letter before him, mad with jealousy and rage. Chapter 37. Come now, the master builder cried. The 20 years of work are done. Flaunt forth the flag and crown with pride the glory of the coping stone. Jack Dunkirk was to slack off his visits to Twickenham. That is to say, as he interpreted the injunction, he was not wholly to discontinue them, in order not to excite suspicion, but he was not to haunt the house. He was to make less frequent voyages up the Silver Thames. He was not to ride in Leafy Lane side by side with fillies. Without having fillies by his side, he cared little about Leafy Lanes, and would rather be at the club. Further, by these absences he was to leave off being necessary to the brightness of her life. It was a hard saying. Nevertheless, the young man felt that he had little reason for complaint. Other fellows he knew, going after other heiresses, had been quite peremptorily sent about their business for good, particularly needy young men like himself. All that Colquhoun extorted of him was that he should slack off. He felt, in a manner, grateful, although had he been a youth of quicker perception, he would have remembered that the lover who slacks off can be no other than the lover who wishes he had not begun. But nobody ever called Jack a clever young man. He was not to give her up altogether. He was not even to give up hoping. He was to have his chance with the rest, but he was warned that no chance was to be opened to him until the young lady should enter upon her first season. Not to give up seeing her, that was everything. Jack Dunkirk had hitherto lived the life of all young men, careless and insouciant with its little round of daily pleasures. He was only different from other young men that he had learned, partly from a sympathetic nature and partly by travel, not to put all his pleasure in that life about town and in country houses, which seems to so many the one thing which the world has to offer. He who has lived out on the prairies for weeks has found that there are other pleasures besides the gaslight joys of town. But his life had been without thought and purposeless, a very chaos of a life, and now he felt vaguely that his whole being was changed. To be with Phyllis day after day, to listen to the outpourings of her freshness and innocence, brought to him the same sort of refreshment as sitting under the little cataract of a mountain stream brings to one who rambles in a hot West Indian island. Things for which he once cared greatly he now cared for no more. The club life, the cards, and the billiards ceased to interest him. He took no delight in them. Perhaps it was a proof of a certain weakness of nature in Jack Dunkirk that he could not at the same time love things in which Phyllis took no part, and the things which made the simple pleasures of her everyday life. He might have been weak, and yet whether he was weak or strong he knew that she leaned upon him. He was so sympathetic, he seemed to know so much, he decided so quickly, he was in his way so masterful that the girl looked up to him as a paragon of wisdom and strength. I think she will always so regard him, because the knowledge of her respect raises Jack daily in moral and spiritual strength, and so her hero approaches daily to her ideal. What is the highest love worth if it have not the power of lifting man and woman together up to the higher levels, where the air is purer, the sunshine brighter, the vision clearer? But Colquhoun's commands had wrought a further change in him. That ugly good-looking face of his which Agatha Lestrange admired so much, and which was wont to be wreathed with a multitudinous smile, was now doleful. To the world of mankind, male mankind, the chief charm of Jack Dunkirk, the main cause of his popularity, his unvarying cheerfulness, was vanished. "You ought to be called Doleful Jack," said lads, "Jack of rueful countenance." "You don't know Tommy," replied the lover, sorrowfully wagging his head. "I've seen Colquhoun and he won't have it, says I must wait. He's waited till 40, I've waited to 35 and we're both pretty jolly. Come, young un, you may take courage by our examples." "You never met Phil when you were 25, said Jack. "Nobody ever saw a girl like Phyllis. 35 seems so great an age to 25, and at 35 one feels so young that it comes upon the possessor of so many years like a shock of cold water to be reminded that he is really no longer young. One good thing Lawrence Colquhoun did not reproach him, partly perhaps because as a guardian he did not thoroughly realize Jack's flagitious conduct, partly because he was an easy-going man, with a notion in his head that he had nothing to do with the work of duennas and keepers of the gynceum. He treated the confessions of the remorseful lover with a cheery contempt, passed them by. No great harm had been done, and the girl was but a child. His own conscience it was which bullied Jack so tremendously. One day he rounded on his accuser like the poor worm in the proverb, who might perhaps have got safe back to its hole but for that ill-advised turning. He met the charges like a man. He pleaded that, criminal as he had been, nefarious and inexcusable as his action was, this action had given him a very high time, and that, if it was all to do over again, he should probably alter his conduct only in degree but not in kind. That is to say, he would see Phyllis oftener and stay with her longer. Conscience knocked him out of time in a couple of rounds, but still he did have the satisfaction of showing fight. Of course he would do the same thing again. There has never been found by duenna, by guardian, by despotic parent, or by interested relation, any law of restraint strong enough to keep apart two young people of the opposite sex and like age, after they have once become attracted towards each other. Prudence and prudery, jealousy and interest, never have much chance. The ancient dames of Dunedin may purse their withered lips and wrinkle their crow's-footed eyes. Love, the unconquered, laughs and conquers again. It is of no use to repeat long explanations about Phyllis. Such as she was, we know her, a law unto herself, careless of prohibitions and unsuspicious of danger. Like Una, she wandered unprotected and fearless among whatever two-legged wolves, bears, eagles, lions, vultures and other beasts and birds of prey might be anxiously waiting to snap her up. Jack was the great-hearted lion who was to bear her safely through the wistful growls of the meaner beasts. The lion is not clever like the fox or the beaver, but one always conceives of him as a gentleman, and therefore fit to be entrusted with such a beautiful maiden as Una or Phyllis. And if Jack was quietly allowed to carry off his treasure, it was Agatha Lestrange who was chiefly to blame, and she, falling in love with Jack herself, quite in a motherly way, allowed the wooing to go on under her very nose. A bad, bad woman, as Lawrence Colquhoun called her. But such a wooing! Miss Ethel Sitterbread, when she sees Amandus making a steady but not an eagerly impetuous advance in her direction at a ball, feels her languid pulses beat a little faster. He is coming after me, she says to herself with pride. They snatch a few moments to sit together in a conservatory. He offers no remark worthy of repetition, nor does she, yet she thinks to herself, he is going to ask me to marry him, he will kiss me, there will be a grand wedding, everybody will be pleased, other girls will be envious, and I shall be delighted. Papa knows that he is well off and well connected. How charming. Now Phyllis allowed her lover to woo her without one thought of love or marriage, of which, indeed, she knew nothing. But if the passion was all on one side, the affection was equally divided, and when Jack truly said that Phyllis did not love him, he forgot that she had given him already all that she knew of love. In that her thoughts, which on her first emancipation leaped forth, bounding and running in all directions with a wild yearning to behold the great unknown, were now returning to herself and mostly flowed steadily, like streams of electric influence in the direction of Jack. Inasmuch as she referred unconsciously everything to Jack as she dressed for him, drew for him, pored diligently over hated reading books for him, and told him all her thoughts. I have not told, nor can I tell, of the many walks and talks these two young people had together, day after day. Jack's boat, that comfortable old tub in which he could, and often did, cut a crab without spilling the contents into the river, lay moored off Agatha's lawn, or rolled slowly up and down the river, Jack rowing while Phyllis steered, sang, talked and laughed. This was pleasant in the morning, but it was far more pleasant in the evening, when the river was so quiet, so still and so black, and when thoughts crowded into the girl's brain, which fled like spirits when she tried to put them into words. Or they rode together along the leafy roads through Richmond Park, and down by that unknown region, far away from the world, where heron rise up from the water's edge, where the wild fowl fly above the lake in figures which remind one of Euclid's definitions, and the deer collect in herds among great ferns half as high as themselves. There they would let the horses walk, while Phyllis, with the slender curving lines of her figure, her dainty dress which fitted it so well, and her sweet face, made the heart of her lover hungry. And when she turned to speak to him, and he saw in the clear depths of her eyes his own face reflected, his passion grew almost too much for him to bear. A delicate dainty maiden, who was yet of strong and healthy physique, one who did not disdain to own a love for cake and strawberries, cream and ices and other pleasant things, who had no young ladyish affectations, who took life eagerly, not languidly, and not a coward as many maidens boast to be. She ruled her horse with a rein as firm as Jack Dunkirk and sat him as steadily. She clinched her little fingers and set her lips hard when she heard a tale of wrong. Her eyes lit up and her bosom heaved when she heard of heroic jest. She was strong to endure and to do. Not every girl would, as Phyllis did, rise in the morning at 5 to train her untaught eyes and hand over those little symbols by which we read and write. Not every girl would patiently begin at 19 the mechanical drudgery of the music lesson. And she did this in confidence, because Jack asked her every day about her lessons, and Agatha L'Estrange was pleased. The emotion which is the next after, and worse than that of love, is sympathy. Phyllis passed through the stages of curiosity and knowledge before she arrived at the stage of sympathy. Perhaps she was not far from the highest stage of all. She learned something every day and told Jack what it was. Sometimes it was an increase in her knowledge of evil. Jack, who was by no means so clever as his biographer, thought that a pity. His idea was the common one, that a maiden should be kept innocent of the knowledge of evil. I think Jack took a prejudiced, even a Philistine, view of the case. He put himself on the same level as the Frenchman who keeps his daughter out of mischief by locking her up in a convent. It is not the knowledge of evil that hurts, any more than the knowledge of black beetles, earwigs, slugs, and other crawling things. The pure in spirit cast it off, just as the gardener who digs and delves among his plants washes his hands and is clean. The thing that hurts is the suspicion and constant thought of evil. The loveliest and most divine creature in the world is she who neither commits any ill, nor thinks any, nor suspects others of ill, who has a perfect pity for backsliders, and a perfect trust in the people around her. Unfortunate it is that experience of life turns pity to anger, and trust into hesitation. Or they would be out upon Agatha's lawn playing croquet, to which that good lady still adhered, or lawn tennis, which she tolerated. There would be the curate. He had abandoned that design of getting up all about Laud, but was madly, ecclesiastically madly in love with Phyllis. There would be occasionally lads, who in his heavy, kindly way pleased this young May Queen. Besides, lads was fond of Jack. There would be Gilead Beck in the straightest of frock coats, and on the most careful behaviour. There would be also 2 or 3 young ladies, compared with whom Phillis was as Rosalind at the court of her uncle, or as Esther among the damsels of the Persian king's seraglio, so fresh and so incomparably fair. "Mrs. Lestrange," Jack whispered one day, "I am going to say a rude thing. Did you pick out the other girls on purpose to set off Phillis?" "What a shame, Jack," said Agatha, who like the rest of the world called him by what was not his Christian name. "The girls are very nice, not so pretty as Phillis, but good-looking, all of them. I call them as pretty a set of girls as you would be likely to see on any lawn this season." "Yes," said Jack, "only you see they are all alike and Phillis is different." That was it, Phillis was different. The girls were graceful, pleasant, and well-bred, but Phillis was all this and more. The others followed the beaten track, in which the strength of life is subdued and its intensity forbidden. Phillis was in earnest about everything, quietly in earnest, not openly bent on enjoyment like the young ladies who run down Greenwich Hill, for instance, but in her way making others feel something of what she felt herself. Her intensity was visible in the eager face, the mobile flashes of her sensitive lips and her brightening eyes. And, most unlike her neighbors, she even forgot her own dress, much as she loved the theory and practice of dress, when once she was interested and was careless about theirs. It was not pleasant for the minor stars. They felt in a vague, uncomfortable way that Phillis was far more attractive. They said to each other that she was strange. One who pretended to know more French than the others said that she was farouche. She was not in the least farouche, and the young lady her calumniator did not understand the adjective, but farouche she continued to be among the maidens of Twickenham and Richmond. Jack Dunkirk heard the epithet applied on one occasion, and burst out laughing. Phillis farouche, Phillis without fear and without suspicion. But then they do teach French so badly at girls' schools, and so poor Phillis remained ticketed with the adjective which least of any belonged to her. A pleasant 6 weeks from April to June, while the late spring blossomed and flowered into summer. A time to remember all his life afterwards with the saddened joy which, despite Dante's observation, does still belong to the memory of past pleasures. But every pleasant time passes, and the 6 weeks were over. Jack was to slack off. The phrase struck him, applied to himself and Phillis as simply in bad taste, but the meaning was plain. He was to present himself at Twickenham with less frequency. Accordingly, he began well by going there the very next day. The new regime has to be commenced somehow, and Jack began his at once. He pulled up in his tub. It was a cloudy and windy day. Drops of rain fell from time to time. The river was swept by sudden gusts which came driving down the stream, marked by broad black patches. There were no other boats out, and Jack struggled upwards against the current. The exercise at least was a relief to the oppression of his thoughts. What was he to do with himself after the slacking off had begun, after that day in fact? The visits might drop to twice a week, then once a week, and then... But surely Colquhoun would be satisfied with such a measure of self-denial. In the intervals, say from Saturday to Saturday, he could occupy himself in thinking about her. He might write to her. Would that be against the letter of the law? It was clearly against the spirit. And another consideration, it was no use writing unless he wrote in printed characters, and in words of not more than 2 syllables. He thought of such a love letter, and of Phillis gravely spelling it out word by word to Mrs. Lestrange. For poor Phillis had not as yet accustomed herself to look on the printed page as a vehicle for thought. Although Agatha read to her every day, she regarded it as the means of conveying to the reader facts such as the elementary reading book delights to set forth, so dry that the adult reader, if a woman, presently feels the dust in her eyes, and if a man is fain to get up and call wildly for quarts of bitter beer. No, Phillis was not educated up to the reception of a letter. He would, he thought, sit in the least frequented room of his club, the drawing-room, and with a book of some kind before him just for a pretence, would pass the leaden hours in thinking of Phillis's perfections. Heavens, when was there a moment by day or by night that he did not think of them? Bump, it was the bow of the ship, which knew by experience very well when to stop, and grounded herself without any conscious volition on his part at the accustomed spot. Jack jumped out and fastened the painter to the tree to which Phillis had once tied him. Then he strode across the lawns and flower-beds, and made for the little morning-room, where he hoped to find the ladies. He found one of them. Fortune sometimes favours lovers. It was the younger one, Phillis herself. She was bending over her work with brush and colour box, looking as serious as if all her future depended on the success of that particular picture. Beside her, tossed contemptuously aside, lay the much-despised lesson-book in reading, for she had done her daily task. She did not hear Jack step in at the open window, and went on with her painting. She wore a dress made of that stuff which looks like brown holland till you come close to it, and then you think it is silk, but are not quite certain, and I believe they call it Indian tussar. Round her dainty waist was a leathern belt set in silver with a chatelaine, like a small armoury of deadly weapons, and for colour she had a crimson ribbon about her neck, to show that the ribbon was not entirely meant for vanity, but had its uses. Phyllis had slung upon it a cross of Maltese silverwork, which I fear Jack had given her himself, and below the cross, where her rounded figure showed it off, she had placed a little bunch of sweet peas. Such a dainty damsel! Not content with the flower in her dress, she had stuck a white jasmine blossom in her hair. All these things Jack noted with speechless admiration. Then she began to sing in a low voice, all to herself, a little French ballad which Mrs. Lestrange had taught her, one of the sweet old French songs. She was painting in the other window at a table drawn up to face it. The curtains were partly pulled together, and the blind was half drawn down, so that she sat in a subdued light, in which only her face was lit up, like the faces in a certain kind of photograph, while her hair and figure lay in shadow. The hangings were of some light rose hue, which tinted the whole room, and threw a warm colouring over the old-fashioned furniture, the pictures, the books, the flowers on the tables, and the ferns in their glasses. Mrs. Lestrange was no follower after the new school. Neutral tints had small charms for her. She liked the warmth and glow of the older fashion in which she had been brought up. It looked to Jack Dunkirk like some shrine dedicated to peace and love, with Phyllis for its priestess or even its goddess. Outside the skies were grey, the wind swept down the river with driving rain. Here was warmth, colour and brightness, so he stood still and watched. And as he waited, an overwhelming passion of love seized him. If the world was well lost for Antony, when he threw it all away for a queen no longer young, and the mother of one son at least almost grown up, what would it have been had his Cleopatra welcomed him in all the splendour of her white Greek beauty at sweet 17? There was no world to be lost for this obscure cadet of a noble house, but all the world to be won. His world was before his eyes. It was an unconscious maid, ignorant of her own surpassing worth and of the power of her beauty. To win her was to be the lord of all the world he cared for. Presently she laid down her brush and raised her head. Then she pushed aside the curtains and looked out upon the gardens. The rain drove against the windows, and the wind beat about the branches of the lilacs on the lawn. She shivered and pulled the curtains together again. "I wish Jack were here," she said to herself. "He is here, Phil," Jack replied. She looked round and darted across the room, catching him by both hands. "Jack, oh, I am glad there is nobody at home. Agatha has gone up to town and I am quite alone. What shall we do this afternoon?" Clearly the right thing for him to propose was that he should instantly leave the young lady and row himself back to Richmond. This, however, was not what he did propose. On the contrary, he kept Phyllis's hands in his and held them tight, looking in her upturned face, where he saw nothing but undisguised joy at his appearance. "Shall we talk? Shall I play to you? Shall I draw you a picture? What shall we do, Jack?" "Well, Phil, I think perhaps we had better talk." Something in his voice struck her. She looked at him sharply. "What has happened, Jack? You do not look happy." "Nothing, Phil, nothing but what I might have expected." But he looked so dismal that it was quite certain he had not expected it. "Tell me, Jack." He shook his head. "Jack, what is the good of being friends if you won't tell me what makes you unhappy?" "I don't know how to tell you, Phil. I don't see a way to begin." "Sit down and begin somehow." She placed him comfortably in the largest chair in the room, and then she stood in front of him and looked in his face with compassionate eyes. The sight of those deep brown orbs, so full of light and pity, smote her lover with a kind of madness. "What is it makes people unhappy? Are you ill?" He shook his head and laughed. "No, Phil, I am never ill. You see, I am not exactly unhappy." "But Jack, you look so dismal." "Yes, that is it, I am a little dismal. No, Phil, no, I am really unhappy and you are the cause." "I the cause, but Jack, why?" "I had a talk with your guardian, Lawrence Culquehown, yesterday. It was all about you, and he wants me not to come here so often, in fact, and I mustn't come." "But why not? What does Lawrence mean?" "That is just what I cannot explain to you. You must try to forgive me." "Forgive you, Jack?" "You see, Phil, I have behaved badly from the beginning. I ought not to have called upon you as I did in Carnarvon Square. I ought not to have let you call me Jack, nor should I have called you Phil. It is altogether improper in the eyes of the world." She was silent for a while. "Perhaps I have known, Jack, that it was a little unusual. Other girls haven't got a Jack Dunkirk, have they? Poor things, that is all you mean, isn't it, Jack? Phil, don't look at me like that. You don't know, you can't understand. No, it is more than unusual, it is quite wrong. I have done nothing wrong, the girl said proudly. If I had, my conscience would make me unhappy, but I do begin to understand what you mean. Last week Agatha asked me if I was not thinking too much about you. And the curate made me laugh because he said, quite by himself in a corner, you know, that Mr. Dunkirk was a happy man. And when I asked him why, he turned very red and said it was because I had given to him what all the world would long to have. He meant Jack. I wish he was here, Jack cried hotly, for me to wring his neck. And one day Laura Herries, that's the girl who said you were farouche, Phil, go on, was talking to Agatha about some young lady who had got compromised by a gentleman's attentions. I asked why, and she replied quite sharply that if I did not know, no one could know. Then she got up and went away. Agatha was angry about it, I could see, but she only said something about understanding when I come out. Miss Herries ought to have her neck wrung too, as well as the curate, said Jack. Compromise improper. Phil beat her little foot on the floor. What does it all mean? Jack, tell me, what is this wrong thing that you and I have done? Not you, Phil, 1,000 times not you. Then I do not care much what other people say, she replied simply. Do you know, Jack, it seems to me as if we never ought to care for what people, besides people we love, say about us. But it is I who have done wrong, said Jack. Have you, Jack? Oh, then I forgive you. I think I know you. You should have come to me with an unreal smile on your face and pretended the greatest deference to my opinion, even when you knew it wasn't worth having. That is what the curate does to young ladies. I saw him yesterday taking Miss Herries's opinion on Holman Hunt's picture. She said it was sweetly pretty. He said, do you really think so? In such a solemn voice, as if he wasn't quite sure that the phrase summed up the whole picture, but was going to think it over quietly. Don't laugh, Jack, because I cannot read like other people, and all I have to go by is what Mr. Dyson told me, and Agatha tells me, and what I see, and what you tell me, Jack, which is worth all the rest to me. The tears came into her eyes, but only for a moment, and she brushed them aside. And I forgive you, Jack, all the more because you did not treat me as you would have treated the girls who seemed to me so lifeless and languid. And Jack, it may be wrong to say it, but oh, so small. What compliment could you have paid me better than to single me out for your friend? You who have seen so much and done so much, my friend, mine. We were friends from the first, were we not? And I have never since hidden anything from you, Jack, and never will. He kept it down still, this mighty yearning that filled his heart, but he could not bear to look her in the face. Every word that she said stabbed him like a knife, because it showed her childish innocence and her utter unconsciousness of what her words might mean. And then she laid her little hand in his. And now you have compromised me, as they would say. What does it matter, Jack? We can go on always just the same as we have been doing, can we not? He shook his head and answered huskily, No, Phil, your guardian will not allow it, you must obey him. He says that I am to come here less frequently, that I must not do you. He is quite right, Phil, any more mischief, and that you are to have your first season in London without any ties or entanglements. My guardian leaves me alone here with Agatha. It is you who have been my real guardian, Jack. I shall do what you tell me to do. I want to do what is best for you, Phil. But child, he caught her by the hands and she half fell, half knelt at his feet and looked up in his eyes with her face full of trouble and emotion. Child, must I tell you? Could not Agatha L. Estrange tell you that there is something in the world very different from friendship? Is it left for me to teach you? They call it love, Phil. He whispered the last words. Love, but I know all about it, Jack. No, Phil, you know nothing. It isn't the love that you bear to Agatha that I mean. Is it the love I have for you, Jack? She asked in all innocence. It may be, Phil, tell me only. He was reckless now and spoke fast and fiercely. Tell me if you love me as I love you. Try to tell me. I love you so much that I cannot sleep for thinking of you, and I think of you all day long. It seems as if my life must have been a long blank before I saw you. All my happiness is to be with you. To think of going on without you maddens me. Poor Jack, she said softly. She did not offer to withdraw her hands, but let them lie in his warm and tender grasp. My dear, my darling, my queen and pearl of girls, who can help loving you? And even to be with you, to have you close to me, to hold your hands in mine, that isn't enough. What more, oh Jack, Jack, what more? She began to tremble, and she tried to take back her hands. He let them go, but before she could change her position he bent down, threw his arms about her, and held her face close to his while he kissed it 1,000 times. What more, my darling, my angel, this and this? Phil, wake at last from your long childhood. Leave the Garden of Eden where you have wandered so many years and come out into the other world, the world of love. My dear, can you love me a little, only a little in return? We are all so different from what you thought us. You will find out some day that I am not clever and good at all, that I have only one thing to give you, my love. Phil, answer me, speak to me, forgive me. He let her go, for she tore herself from him and sprang to her feet, burying her face in her hands and sobbing aloud. Forgive me, it was all that he could say. Jack, what is it? What does it mean? Oh, Jack. She lifted her face and looked about her with hands outstretched as one who feels in the darkness. Her cheeks were white and her eyes wild. What does it mean? What is it you have said? What is it you have done? Phil. Yes, hush, don't speak to me, not yet, Jack, wait a moment, my brain is full of strange thoughts. She put out trembling hands before her, like one who wakes suddenly in a dream, and spoke with short, quick breath. Something seems to have come upon me. Help me, Jack, oh help me, I am frightened. He took her in his arms and soothed and caressed her like a child, while she sobbed and cried. Look at me, Jack, she said presently. Tell me, am I the same? Is there any change in me? Yes, Phil, yes, my darling, you are changed. Your sweet eyes are full of tears like the skies in April, and your cheeks are pale and white. Let me kiss them till they get their own color again. He did kiss them, and she stood unresisting, but she trembled. I know, Jack, now, she said softly. It all came upon me in a moment when your lips touched mine. Oh, Jack, it was as if something snapped, as if a veil fell from my eyes. I know now what you meant when you said just now that you loved me. Do you, Phil, and can you love me too? Yes, Jack, I will tell you when I am able to talk again. Let me sit down, sit with me, Jack. She drew him beside her on the sofa and murmured low, while he held her hands. Do you like to sit just so, holding my hands? Are you better now, Jack? Do you think, Jack, that I can have always loved you, without knowing it all, just as you love me? Oh, my poor Jack. My heart beats so fast, and I am so happy. What have you said to me, Jack, that I should be so happy? See, the sun has come out, and the showers are over and gone, and the birds are singing, all the sweet birds. They are singing for me, Jack, for you and me, oh, for you and me. Her voice broke down again, and she hid her face upon her lover's shoulder, crying happy tears. He called her 1,000 endearing names. He told her that they would be always together, that she had made him the happiest man in all the world, that he loved her more than any girl ever had been loved in the history of mankind, that she was the crown and pearl and queen of all the women who ever lived. And then she looked up, smiling through her tears. Ah, happy, happy day. Ah, day forever to be remembered, even when, if ever, the years shall bring its 50th anniversary to an aged pair, whose children and grandchildren stand around their trembling feet. Ah, moments that live forever in the memory of a life. They die but are immortal. They perish all too quickly, but they bring forth the precious fruits of love and constancy, of trust, affection, good works, peace and joy, which never perish. Take me on the river, Jack, she said presently. I want to think it all over again and try to understand it better. He fetched cushion and wrapper, for the boat was wet, and placed her tenderly in the boat, and then he began to pull gently up the stream. The day had suddenly changed. The morning had been gloomy and dull, but the afternoon was bright. The strong wind was dropped for a light, cool breeze. The swans were cruising about with their lordly pretense of not caring for things external, and the river ran clear and bright. They were very silent now. The girl sat in her place, looking with full soft eyes on the wet and dripping branches or in the cool depths of the stream. Presently they passed an old gentleman fishing in a punt. He was the same old gentleman whom Phyllis saw one morning, now so long ago, when he had that little misfortune we have narrated and tumbled backwards in his ark. He saw them coming and adjusted his spectacles. Youth and beauty again, he murmured. And she's been crying. That young fellow has said something cruel to her. Wish I could break his head for him. The pretty creature, he'll come to a bad end, that young man. Then he impaled an immense worm savagely and went on fishing. A very foolish old gentleman this. I am trying to make it all out quite clearly, Jack, Phyllis presently began, and it is so difficult. Her eyes were still bright with tears, but she did not tremble now, and the smile was back upon her lips. My darling, let it remain difficult. Only tell me now, if you can, that you love me. Yes, Jack, she said, not in the frank and childish unconsciousness of yesterday, but with the soft blush of a woman who is wooed. Yes, Jack, I know now that I do love you as you love me, because my heart beat when you kissed me, and I felt all of a sudden that you were all the world to me. Phil, I don't deserve it. I don't deserve you. Not deserve me? Oh, Jack, you make me feel humble when you say that, and I am so proud. So proud and so happy, she went on after a pause. And the girls who know all along, how do they find it out? Want everyone for herself this great happiness too. I have heard them talk and never understood till now. Poor girls, I wish they had their own Jack, not my Jack. Her lover had no words to reply. Poor boy, and you went about with your secret so long. Tell me how long, Jack? Since the very first day I saw you in Carnarvon Square, Phil. All that time, did you love me on that day, not the first day of all, Jack? Oh, surely not the very first day. Yes, not as I love you now that I know you so well, my fillies, mine, but only then because you were so pretty. Do men always fall in love with a girl because she is pretty? Yes, Phil, they begin because she is pretty, and they love her more every day when she is so sweet and so good as my darling Phil. All this time Jack had been leaning on his oars, and the boat was drifting slowly down the current. It was now close to the punt where the old gentleman sat watching them. They have made it up, he said. That's right, and he chuckled. She looked dreamy and contented. The tears were gone out of her eyes, and a sweet softness lay there, like the sunshine on a field of grass. She is a rose of Sharon and a lily of the valley, said this old gentleman. That young fellow ought to be banished from the state for making other people envious of his luck. Looks a good-tempered rogue, too. He observed with delight that they were thinking of each other while the boat drifted nearer to his punt. Presently, bump, bump. Jack seized his sculls and looked up guiltily. The old gentleman was nodding and smiling to fillies. Made it up, he asked most impertinently. That is right, that is right. Give you joy, sir, give you joy, wish you both happiness. Wish I had it to do all over again. God bless you, my dear. His jolly red face beamed like the setting sun under his big straw hat, and he wagged his head and laughed. Jack laughed too. At other times he would have thought the old angler an extremely impertinent person. Now he only laughed. Then he turned the boat's head, and rowed his bride swiftly homewards. Phil, I am like Jason bringing home Medea, he said, with a faint reminiscence of classical tradition. I have explained that Jack was not clever. I hope not, said Phil. Medea was a dreadful person. Then Paris bringing home Helen, no, Phil, only your lover bringing home the sweetest girl that ever was, and worth 35 Helens. When they landed, Agatha L'Estrange was on the lawn waiting for them. To her surprise, Phillies, on disembarking, took Jack by the arm and his hand closed over hers. Mrs. L'Estrange gasped, and in Phillies's tear-bright eyes she saw at last the light and glow of love, and in Phillies's blushing face she saw the happy pride of the celestial Venus who has met her only love. Children, children, she said, what is this? Phillies made answer, in words which Abraham Dyson used to read to her from a certain book, but which she never understood till now, made answer with her face upturned to her lover. I am my beloved's, and his desire is toward me. They were a quiet party that evening. Jack did not want to talk. He asked Phillies to sing. He sat by in a sort of rapture while her voice, in the songs she most affected, whispered and sang to his soul not words, but suggestions of every innocent delight. She recovered something of her gaiety, but their usual laughter was hushed as if by some unexpressed thought. It will never come back to her again, that old mirth and light heart of childhood. She felt while she played as if she was in some great cathedral. The fancies of her brain built over her head a pile more mystic and wonderful than any she had seen. Its arches towered to the sky, its aisles led far away into dim space. She was walking slowly up the church hand in hand with Jack, towards a great rose light in the east. An anthem of praise and thanksgiving echoed along the corridors and pealed like thunder among the million rafters of the roof. Round them floated faces which looked and smiled, and she heard the voice of Abraham Dyson in her ear. Life should be twofold, not single. That, Phillies, is the great secret of the world. Every man is a priest, every woman is a priestess. It is a sacrament which you have learned of Jack this day. Go on with him in faith and hope. Love is the universal church and heaven is everywhere. Live in it, die in it, and dying begin your life of love again. Phil, cried Jack, what is it? You look as if you had seen a vision. I have heard the voice of Abraham Dyson, she said solemnly. He is satisfied and pleased with us, Jack. That was nothing to what followed, for presently there occurred a really wonderful thing. On Phillies's table, they were all three sitting in the pleasant morning room, lay among her lesson books and drawing materials a portfolio. Jack turned it over carelessly. There was nothing at all in it except a single sheet of white paper, partly written over, but there had been other sheets and these were torn off. It is an old book full of writing, said Phillies carelessly. I have torn out all the leaves to make rough sketches at the back. There is only one left now. Jack took it up and read the scanty remnant. Good heavens, he cried. Have you really destroyed all these pages, Phil? Then he laughed. What is it, Jack? Yes, I have torn them all out, drawn rough things on them and then burnt them, everyone. Is it anything important? Asked Mrs. L. Estrange. I should think it was important, said Jack. Ho ho, Phillies has destroyed the whole of Mr. Dyson's lost chapter on the coping stone, and now his will is not worth the paper it is written on. It was actually so. Bit by bit, while Joseph Jagnell was leaving no corner unturned in the old house at Highgate in search of the precious document, without which Mr. Dyson's will was so much waste paper, this young lady was contentedly cutting out the sheets one by one, and using them up for her first unfinished groups. Of course she could not read one word of what was written. It was a fitting nemesis to the old man's plans that they were frustrated through the very means by which he wished to regenerate the world. And now nothing at all left but a tag end, a bit of the peroration, the last words of the final summing up. And this was what Jack read aloud. These provisions and no other. Thus will I have my college for the better education of women founded and maintained. Thus shall it grow and develop, till the land is full of the gracious influence of womankind at her best and noblest. The coping stone of a girl's education should be and must be love. When Phillies Fleming, my ward, whose example shall be taken as the model for my college, feels the passion of love, her education is finally completed. She will have much afterwards to learn, but self-denial, sympathy and faith come best through love. Woman is born to be loved. That woman only approaches the higher state who has been wooed and who has loved. When Phillies loves, she will give herself without distrust and wholly to the man who wins her. It is my prayer, my last prayer for her, that he may be worthy of her. Here Jack's voice faltered for a moment. Her education has occupied my whole thoughts for 13 years. It has been the business of my later years. Now I send her out into the world prepared for all, except treachery, neglect, and ill treatment. Perhaps her character would pass through these and come out the brighter. But we do not know, we cannot tell beforehand. Lord, lead her not into temptation, and so deal with her lover as he shall deal with her. Amen, said Agatha L. Estrange. But Phillies sprang to her feet and threw up her arms. I have found it, she cried. Oh, how often did he talk to me about the coping stone. Now I have nothing more to learn, oh Jack, Jack. She fell into his arms and lay there as if it was her proper place. We have found the coping stone, you and I between us, and it is here, it is here. Chapter 38. 'Tis well to be off with the old love, though you never get on with a new. During the 2 or 3 weeks following their success with Gilead Beck, the twins were conspicuous. Had anyone noticed them? For a recklessness of expenditure quite without parallel in their previous history, they plunged as regarded hansoms, paying whatever was asked with an airy prodigality. They dined at the club every day and drank champagne at all hours. They took half-guinea stalls at theatres. They went down to Greenwich and had fish dinners. They appeared with new chains and rings. They even changed their regular hours of sleep and sometimes passed the whole day broad awake, in the pursuit of youthful pleasures. They winked and nodded at each other in a way which suggested all kinds of delirious delights, and Cornelius even talked of adding an episode to the epic, based on his own later experiences, which he would call, he said, the Jubilee of Joy. The funds for this fling, all too short, were provided by their American patron. Gilead Beck had no objection to advance them something on account. The young gentlemen found it so pleasant to spend money that they quickly overcame scruples about asking for more. Perhaps they would have gone on getting more, but for a word of caution spoken by Jack Dunkirk. In consequence of this unkindness, they met each other one evening in the studio with melancholy faces. I had a letter today from Mr. Gilead Beck, said Cornelius to Humphrey. So had I, said Humphrey to Cornelius. In answer to a note from me, said Cornelius. In reply to a letter of mine, said Humphrey. It is sometimes a little awkward, brother Humphrey, Cornelius remarked with a little temper, that our inclinations so often prompt us to do the same thing at the same time. Said Humphrey, I suppose then, Cornelius, that you asked him for money. I did, Humphrey. How much has the patron advanced you already on the great picture? 200 only, a mere trifle, and now he refuses to advance any more until the picture is completed. Some enemy, some jealous brother artist must have corrupted his mind. My case too, I asked for a simple £50. It is the end of May, and the country would be delightful if one could go there. I have already drawn 4 or 5 cheques of 50 each on account of the epic. He says, this mercenary and mechanical patron, that he will not lend me any more until the poem is brought to him finished. Some carping critic has been talking to him. How much of the poem is finished? How much of the picture is done? The questions were asked simultaneously, but no answer was returned by either. Then each sat for a few moments in gloomy silence. The end of May, murmured Humphrey. We have to be ready by the beginning of October. June, July, only 4 months. My painting is designed for many hundreds of figures. Your poem for how many lines, brother? 20 cantos of about 500 lines each. 20 times 500 is 10,000. Then they relapsed into silence again. Brother Cornelius, the artist went on, this has been a most eventful year for us. We have been rudely disturbed from the artistic life of contemplation and patient work into which we had gradually dropped. We have been hurried, I say, brother, into action, perhaps prematurely. Cornelius grasped his brother's hand, but said nothing. You, Cornelius, have engaged yourself to be married. Cornelius dropped his brother's hand. Pardon me, Humphrey, it is you that is engaged to Phyllis Fleming. I am nothing of the sort, Cornelius, the other returned sharply. I am astonished that you should make such a statement. One of us certainly is engaged to the young lady, and as certainly it is not I, let your brother Humphrey hope, she said. Those were her very words. I do think, brother, that it is a little ungenerous of you, after all the trouble I took on your behalf, to try to force this young lady on me. Humphrey's cheek turned pallid. He plunged his hands into his silky beard and walked up and down the room gesticulating. I went down on purpose to tell Phyllis about him. I spoke to her of his ardor. She said she appreciated it, Cornelius. I even went so far as to say that you offered her a virgin heart, periling my own soul by those very words, a virgin heart. He laughed melodramatically. And after that German milkmaid. Ha ha, the poet and the milkmaid. Cornelius by this time was red with anger. The brothers, alike in so many things, differed in this, that, when roused to passion, while Humphrey grew white, Cornelius grew crimson. And what did I do for you? He cried out. The brothers were now on opposite sides of the table, walking backwards and forwards with agitated strides. I told her that you brought her a heart which had never beat for another, that, after your miserable little Roman model, an artist not able to resist the charms of his own model. Cornelius, cried Humphrey, suddenly stopping and bringing his fist with a bang upon the table. Humphrey, cried his brother, exactly imitating his gesture. Their faces glared into each other's. Cornelius, as usual, wrapped in his long dressing gown, his shaven cheeks purple with passion. Humphrey in his loose velvet jacket, his white lips and cheeks, and his long silken beard trembling to every hair. It was the first time the brothers had ever quarrelled in all their lives, and like a tempest on Lake Windermere, it sprang up without the slightest warning. They glared in a steady way for a few minutes, and then drew back and renewed their quick and angry walk side by side, with the table between them. To bring up the old German business, said Cornelius. To taunt me with the Roman girl, said Humphrey. Will you keep your engagement like a gentleman and marry the girl? Cried the poet. Will you behave as a man of honour and go to the altar with Phyllis Fleming? Asked the artist. I will not, said Cornelius. Nothing shall induce me to get married. Nor will I, said Humphrey. I will see myself drawn and quartered first. Then, said Cornelius, go and break it to her yourself, for I will not. Break what? Asked Humphrey passionately. Break her heart when I tell her, if I must, that my brother repudiates his most sacred promises. Cornelius was touched, he relented, he softened. Can it be that she loves us both? They were at the end of the table, near the chairs, which as usual were side by side. Can that be so, Cornelius? They drew nearer the chairs, they sat down, they turned by force of habit lovingly towards each other, and their faces cleared. Brother Humphrey, said Cornelius, I see that we have mismanaged this affair. It will be a wrench to the poor girl, but it will have to be done. I thought you wanted to marry her. I thought you did. And so we each pleaded the other's cause, and the poor girl loves us both. Good heavens, what a dreadful thing for her. I remember nothing in fiction so startling. To be sure, there is some excuse for her. But she can't marry us both. No, I suppose not. No, certainly not. Heaven forbid, and as you will not marry her. Humphrey shook his head in a decided manner. And I will not. Mary, interrupted Humphrey. What, and give up this, have to get up early to take breakfast at 9, to be chained to work, to be inspected and interfered with while at work. Phillies drew me once and pinned the portrait on my easel, to be restricted in the matter of port, to have to go to bed at 11, perhaps Cornelius to have babies, and beside if they should be twins, fancy being shaken out of your poetic dream by the cries of twins. No sitting up at night with pipes and brandy and water, echoed the poet. And Humphrey, here he chuckled and his face quite returned to its brotherly form. Should we go abroad, no flirting with Roman models, a. Ho ho ho, laughed the artist melodiously, and no carrying milk pails up the Heidelberg hills, a. Marriage be hanged, cried the poet, starting up again. We will preserve our independence, Humphrey, we will be free to woo but not to wed. Was there ever a more unprincipled bard? It is sad to relate that the artist echoed his brother. We will, Cornelius, we will, vive la libert. He snapped his fingers and began to sing. Quond on est Paris, on ecrit a sunpier, qui fate repents brigand, tu nen as. He broke short off and clapped his hands like a schoolboy. We will go to Paris next week, brother. We will, Humphrey, if we can get any more money. And now, how to get out of the mess? Do you think Mrs. L'Estrange will interfere? Or Culquehounds? Or Joseph? The best way would be to pretend it was all a mistake. Let us go tomorrow and cry off as well as we can. We will, Cornelius. The quarrel and its settlement made them thirsty, and they drank a whole potash and brandy each before proceeding with the interrupted conversation. Poor little Phillies, said the artist, filling his pipe. I hope she won't pine much. Ariadne, you know, said the poet, and then he forgot what Ariadne did and broke off short. It isn't our fault, after all. Men of genius are always run after. Women are made to love men and men are made to break their hearts. Law of nature, dear Cornelius, law of nature. Perhaps the man is a fool who binds himself to one. Art alone should be our mistress, glorious art. Yes, said Cornelius, you are quite right, and what about Mr. Gilead Beck? This was a delicate question, and the artist's face grew grave. What are we to do, Cornelius? I don't know, Humphrey. Will the poem be finished? Number will the picture? Not a chance. Had we not better, Humphrey, considering all the circumstances, make up our minds to throw over the engagement? Tell me, Cornelius, how much of your poem remains to be done? Well, you see, there is not much actually written. Will you show it to me, what there is of it? It is all in my head, Humphrey, nothing is written. He blushed prettily as he made the confession, but the artist met him halfway with a frank smile. It is curious, Cornelius, that up to the present I have not actually drawn any of the groups. My figures are still in my head. Both were surprised. Each, spending his own afternoons in sleep, had given the other credit for working during that part of the day, but they were too much accustomed to keep up appearances to make any remark upon this curious coincidence. Then, brother, said the poet with a sigh of relief, there really is not the slightest use in leading Mr. Beck to believe that the works will be finished by October, and we had better ask for a longer term. A year longer would do for me. A year longer would, I think, do for me, said Humphrey, stroking his beard, as if he was calculating how long each figure would take to put in. We will go and see Mr. Beck tomorrow. Better not, said the sagacious poet. Why not? He might ask for the money back. True, brother, he must be capable of that meanness, or he would have given us that cheque we asked for. Very true, we will write. What excuse shall we make? We will state the exact truth, brother. No excuse need be invented. We will tell our patron that art cannot, must not be forced. This settled, Cornelius declared that a weight was off his mind, which had oppressed him since the engagement with Mr. Beck was first entered into. Nothing, he said, so much obstructed the avenues of fancy, checked the flow of ideas, and destroyed grasp of language, as a slavish time engagement. Now, he went on to explain, he felt free. Already his mind, like a garden in May, was blossoming in 1,000 sweet flowers. Now he was at peace with mankind. Before this relief he had been, Humphrey would bear him out, inclined to lose his temper over trifles, and the feeling of thraldom caused him only that very evening to use harsh words even to his twin brother. Here he held out his hand, which Humphrey grasped with effusion. They wrote their letters next day, not early in the day, because they prolonged their evening parliament till late, and it was 1 o'clock when they took breakfast, but they wrote the letters after breakfast, and at 2 they took the train to Twickenham. Phillies received them in her morning room. They appeared almost as nervous and agitated as when they called a week before. So shaky were their hands that Phillies began by prescribing for them a glass of wine each, which they took, and said they felt better. "We come for a few words of serious explanation," said the poet. "Yes," said Phillies, "will Mrs. L'Estrange do?" "On the contrary, it is with you that we would speak." "Very well," she replied, "pray go on." They were sitting side by side on the sofa, looking as grave as a pair of owls. There was something Gog and Magogish, too, in their proximity. Phillies found herself smiling when she looked at them, so, to prevent laughing in their very faces, she changed her place and went to the open window. "Now," she said. Cornelius, with the gravest face in the world, began again. "It is a delicate and, I fear, a painful business," he said. "Miss Fleming, you doubtless remember a conversation I had with you last week on your lawn." "Certainly, you told me that your brother, Mr. Humphrey, adored me. You also said that he brought me a virgin heart. I remember perfectly. I did not understand your meaning then, but I do now. I understand it now." She spoke the last words with softened voice because she was thinking of the coping stone and Jack Dunkirk. Humphrey looked indignantly at his brother. Here was a position to be placed in, but Cornelius lifted his hand, with a gesture which meant patience. "I will see you through this affair," and went on. "You see, Miss Fleming, I was under a mistake. My brother, who has the highest respect in the abstract for womanhood, which is the incarnation and embodiment of all that is graceful and beautiful in this fair world of ours, does not, after all." Phillies looked at Humphrey. He sat by his brother, trembling with a mixture of shame and terror. They were not brave men, these twins, and they certainly drank habitually more than is good for the nervous system. She began to laugh, not loudly, but with a little ripple of mirth which terrified them both, because in their vanity they thought it the first symptoms of hysterical grief. Then she stepped to the sofa, and placed both her hands on the unfortunate artist's shoulder. He thought that she was going to shake him, and his soul sank into his boots. "You mean that he does not, after all, adore me? Oh, Mr. Humphrey, was it for this that you offered me a virgin heart? Is this your gratitude to me for drawing your likeness when you were hard at work in the studio? What shall I say to your brother Joseph, and what will he say to you?" "My dear young lady," Cornelius interposed hastily, "there is not the slightest reason to bring Joseph into the business at all. He must not be told of this unfortunate mistake. Humphrey does adore you. Speak, brother, do you not adore Miss Fleming?" Humphrey was gasping and panting. "I do," he ejaculated. "I do, oh, most certainly." Then Phillies left him and turned to his brother. "But there is yourself, Mr. Cornelius. You are not an artist, you are a poet. You spend your days in the workshop where Jack Dunkirk and I found you wrapped in so poetic a dream that your eyes were closed and your mouth open. If you made a mistake about Humphrey, it is impossible that he could have made a mistake about you." "This is terrible," said Cornelius. "Explain, brother Humphrey. Miss Fleming, we know you as well, are victims of a dreadful error." He wiped his brow and appealed to his brother. Released from the terror of Phillies's hands upon his shoulder, the artist recovered some of his courage and spoke, but his voice was faltering. "I, too," he said, "mistook the respectful admiration of my brother for something dearer. Miss Fleming, he is already wedded." "Wedded? Are you a married man, Mr. Cornelius? Oh, and where is the virgin heart?" "Wedded to his art," Humphrey explained. Then he went a little off his head, I suppose, in the excitement of this crisis, because he continued in broken words. "Wedded long ago, object of his life's love, with milk pails on the hills of Heidelberg and light blue eyes, the muse of song. But he regards you with respectful admiration." "Most respectful," said Cornelius, "as Petrarch regarded the wife of the Count de Sade. Will you forgive us, Miss Fleming, and try to forget us?" "So, gentlemen," the young lady said with sparkling eyes, "you come to say that you would rather not marry me. I wonder if that is usual with men." "No, no," they both cried together, "happy is the man." "You may be the happy man, Humphrey," said Cornelius. "No, you, brother, you." Never had wedlock seemed so dreadful a thing as it did now, with a possible bride standing before them, apparently only waiting for the groom to make up his mind. "I will forgive you both," she said, "so go away happy, but I am afraid I shall never be able to forget you, and if I send you a sketch of yourselves just as you look now, so ashamed and so foolish, perhaps you will hang it up in the workshop or the studio, to be looked at when you are awake, that is, when you are not at work." They looked guiltily at each other and drew a little apart. It was the most cruel speech that Phyllis had ever made, but she was a little angry with this vain and conceited pair of windbags. "I shall not tell Mr. Joseph Jagnal, because he is a sensible man and would take it ill, I am sure. And I shall not tell my guardian, Lawrence Colquhoun, because I do not know what he might say or do. And I shall not tell Mrs. L'Estrange, that is, I shall not tell her the whole of it for your sakes. But I must tell Jack Dunkirk, because I am engaged to be married to Jack, and because I love him and must tell him everything." They cowered before her as they thought of the possible consequences of this information. "You need not be frightened," she went on. "Jack will not call to see you and disturb you at your work." Her eyes, that began by dancing with fun, now flashed indignation. It was not that she felt angry at what most girls would have regarded as a deliberate insult, but the unmanliness of the two filled her with contempt. They looked so small and so mean. "Go," she said, pointing to the door. "I forgive you, but never again dare to offer a girl each other's virgin heart." They literally slunk away like a pair of beaten hounds. Then Phyllis suddenly felt sorry for them as they crept out of the door, one after the other. She ran after them and called them back. "Stop," she cried. "We must not part like that. Shake hands, Cornelius. Shake hands, Humphrey. Come back and take another glass of wine. Indeed you want it, you are shaking all over, come." She led them back, one in each hand, and poured out a glass of sherry for each. "You could not have married me, you know," she said, laughing, "because I am going to marry Jack. There, forgive me for speaking unkindly, and we will remain friends." They took her hand, but they did not speak, and something like a tear stood in their eyes. When they left her, Phyllis observed that they did not take each other's arm as usual, but walked separate, and they looked older. Chapter 39. What is it you see? A nameless thing, a creeping snake in the grass. Who was the writer of the letters? They were all in one hand, and that a feigned hand. Gabriel Cassilis sat with these anonymous accusations against his wife spread out upon the table before him. He compared one with another. He held them up to the light. He looked for chance indications which a careless moment might leave behind. There were none, not a stroke of the pen, not even the name of the shop where the paper was sold. They were all posted at the same place, but that was nothing. The handwriting was large, upright, and perhaps designedly ill-formed. It appeared to be the writing of a woman, but of this Mr. Cassilis was not sure. Always the same tale, always reference to a secret between Colquhoun and his wife. What was that secret? In Colquhoun's room, alone with him, almost under his hand. But where? He went into the bedroom, which was lighted by the gas of the court, an open room furnished without curtains. There was certainly no one concealed, because concealment was impossible, and in the sitting-room. Then he remembered that the room was dimly lighted. Curtains kept out the gaslight of the court. Colquhoun had on his entrance lowered the silver lamp. There was a heavy green shade on this. It was possible that she might have been in the room while he was there, and listening to every word. The thought was maddening. He tried to put it all before himself in logical sequence, but could not. He tried to fence with the question, but it would not be evaded. He tried to persuade himself that suspicions resting on an anonymous slander were baseless, but every time his mind fell back upon the voice which proclaimed his wife's dishonor. A man on the rack might as well try to dream of soft beds and luxurious dreamless sleep. A man being flogged at the cart-tail might as well try to transport his thoughts to boyhood's games upon a village green. A man at the stake might as well try to think of deep delicious draughts of ice-cold water from a shady brook. The agony and shame of the present are too much for any imagination. It was so to Gabriel Cassilis. The one thing which he trusted in, after all the villainies and rogueries he had learned during 65 years, mostly spent among men trying to make money, was his wife's fidelity. It was like the gospel, a thing to be accepted and acted upon with unquestioning belief. Good heavens, if a man cannot believe in his wife's honesty, in what is he to believe? Gabriel Cassilis was not a violent man. He could not find relief in angry words and desperate deeds like a Moor of Venice. His jealousy was a smouldering fire, a flame which burned with a dull fierce heat, a disease which crept over body and mind alike, crushing energy, vitality and life out of both. Everything might go to ruin round him. He was no longer capable of thought and action. Telegrams and letters lay piled before him on the table, and he left them unopened. Outside, his secretary was in dismay. His employer would receive no one and would attend to nothing. He signed mechanically such papers as were brought him to sign, and then he motioned the secretary to the door. This apathy lasted for 4 days. the 4 days most important of any in the lives of himself, of Gilead Beck, and of Lawrence Colquhoun. For the fortunes of all hung upon his shaking it off, and he did not shake it off. On the second day, the day when he got the letter telling him that his wife had been in Colquhoun's chambers while he was there, he sent for a private detective. He put into his hands all the letters. "Written by a woman," said the officer. "Have you any clue, sir?" None whatever. I want you to watch. You will watch my wife and you will watch Mr. Colquhoun. Get every movement watched and report to me every morning. Can you do this? Good, then go and spare neither pains nor money." The next morning's report was unsatisfactory. Colquhoun had gone to the park in the afternoon, dined at his club, and gone home to his chambers at 11. Mrs. Cassilis, after dining at home, went out at 10 and returned early, at 11:30. But there came a letter from the anonymous correspondent. "You are having a watch set on them. Good, but that won't find out the Scotch secret. She was in his room while you were there, hidden somewhere, but I do not know where." He went home to watch his wife with his own eyes. He might as well have watched a marble statue. She met his eyes with the calm, cold look to which he was accustomed. There was nothing in her manner to show that she was other than she had always been. He tried in her presence to realize the fact if it was a fact. "This woman," he said to himself, "has been lying hidden in Colquhoun's chambers listening while I talked to him. She was there before I went, she was there when I came away. What is her secret?" What indeed? She seemed a woman who could have no secrets, a woman whose life from her cradle might have been exposed to the whole world, who would have found nothing but cause of admiration and respect. In her presence, under her influence, his jealousy lost something of its fierceness. He feared her too much to suspect her while in his sight. It was at night, in his office, away from her, that he gave full swing to the bitterness of his thoughts. In the hours when he should have been sleeping, he paced his room, wrapped in his dressing gown, a long, lean figure with eyes aflame and thoughts that tore him asunder. And in the hours when he should have been waking, he sat with bent shoulders, glowering at the letters of her accuser, gazing into a future which seemed as black as ink. His life, he knew, was drawing to its close. Yet a few more brief years, and the summons would come for him to cross the river. Of that he had no fear, but it was dreadful to think that his age was to be dishonored. Success was his, the respect which men give to success was his. No one inquired very curiously into the means by which success was commanded. He was a name and a power. Now that name was to be tarnished, by no act of his own, by no fault of his, by the treachery of the only creature in the world, except his infant child in whom he trusted. He would have, perhaps, to face the publicity of an open court, to hear his wrongs set forth to a jury, to read his case in the daily papers. And he would have to alter his will. Oddly enough, of all the evil things which seemed about to fall on him, not one troubled him more than the last. His detective brought him no news on the next day, but his unknown correspondent did. "She is tired," the letter said, "of not seeing Mr. Colquhoun for 3 whole days. She will see him tomorrow. There is to be a garden party at Mrs. L. Estrange's Twickenham villa. Mr. Colquhoun will be there, and she is going too to meet him. If you dared, if you had the heart of a mouse, you would be there too. You would arrive late. You would watch and see for yourself, unseen if possible, how they meet and what they say to each other. An invitation lies for you as well as your wife upon the table. Go." While he was reading this document, his secretary came in uncalled. "The El Dorado stock," he said in his usual whisper. "Have you decided what to do? Settling day on Friday. Have you forgotten what you hold, sir?" "I have forgotten nothing," Gabriel Cassilis replied. "El Dorado stock, I never forget anything, leave me. I shall see no one today, no one is to be admitted, I am very busy." "I don't understand it," the secretary said to himself. "Has he got information that he keeps to himself? Has he got a deeper game on than I ever gave him credit for? What does it mean? Is he going off his head?" More letters and more telegrams came. They were sent in to the inner office, but nothing came out of it. That night Gabriel Cassilis left his chair at 10 o'clock. He had eaten nothing all day. He was faint and weak. He took something at a city railway station and drove home in a cab. His wife was out. In the hall he saw her woman, the tall woman with the unprepossessing face. "You are Mrs. Cassilis's maid?" he asked. "I am, sir." "Come with me." He took her to his own study and sat down. Now he had the woman with him, he did not know what to ask her. "You called me, sir," she said. "Do you want to know anything? How long have you been with your mistress?" "I came to her when her former maid, Janet, died, sir. Janet was with her for many years before she married." Janet, a Scotch name. Janet was with my mistress in Scotland. Yes, Mrs. Cassilis was in Scotland, yes, and Janet was in your confidence. We had no secrets from each other, sir. Janet told me everything. What was there to tell? Nothing, sir. What should there be? This was idle fencing. You may go, he said. Stay, let them send me up something, a cup of tea, a slice of meat, anything. Then he recommenced his dreary walk up and down the room. Later on a curious feeling came over him, quite a strange and novel feeling. It was as if while he thought, or rather while his fancies like so many devils played riot in his brain, he could not find the right words in which to clothe his thoughts. He struggled against the feeling. He tried to talk, but the wrong words came from his lips. Then he took a book. Yes, he could read. It was nonsense, he shook off the feeling. But he shrank from speaking to any servant and went to bed. That night he slept better, and in the morning was less agitated. He breakfasted in his study, and then he went down to his office. It was the 4th day since he had opened no letters and attended to no business. He remembered this and tried to shake off the gloomy fit. And then he thought of the coming coup and tried to bring his thoughts back to their usual channel. How much did he hold of Eldorado stock, rising higher day by day, but 3 days, 3 short days before settling day. The largest stake he had ever ventured, a stake so large that when he thought of it his spirit and nerve came back to him. For once, for the last time, he entered his office, holding himself erect, and looking brighter than he had done for days, and he sat down to his letters with an air of resolution. Unfortunately, the first letter was from the anonymous correspondent. She wrote to him today. She told him that she could bear her life no longer. She threatened to tell the secret right out. She will have an explanation with him tomorrow at Mrs. Lestrange's. Do you go down and you will hear the explanation. Be quiet and the secret. He started from his chair, the letter in his hand, and looked straight before him. Was it then all true? Would that very day give him a chance of finding out the secret between Lawrence Culquehown and his wife? He put up his glasses and read the letter, the last of a long series, every one of which had been a fresh arrow in his heart, again and again. Then he sat down and burst into tears. A young man's tears may be forced from him by many a passing sorrow, but an old man's only by the reality of a sorrow which cannot be put aside. The deaths of those who are dear to the old man fall on him as so many reminders that his own time will soon arrive, but it is not for such things as death that he laments. I loved her, moaned Gabriel Cassilis. I loved her and I trusted her, and this the end. He did not curse her nor Culquehown nor himself. It was all the hand of fate. It was hard upon him, harder than he expected or knew, but he bore it in silence. He sat so, still and quiet, a long while. Then he put together all the letters which the detective had brought back and placed them in his pocket. Then he dallied and played with the paper and pencils before him, just as one who is restless and uncertain in his mind. Then he looked at his watch. It was past 3. The garden party was for 4, and then he rose suddenly, put on his hat and passed out. His secretary asked him as he went through his office if he would return and at what time. Mr. Cassilis made a motion with his hand, as if to put the matter off for a few moments, and replied nothing. When he got into the street, it occurred to him that he could not answer the secretary because that same curious feeling was upon him again, and he had lost the power of speech. It was strange, and he laughed. Then the power of speech as suddenly returned to him. He called a cab and told the driver where to go. It is a long drive to Twickenham. He was absorbed in his thoughts, and as he sat back, gazing straight before him, the sensation of not being able to speak kept coming and going in his brain. This made him uneasy, but not much, because he had graver things to think about. At 4:30 he arrived within a few yards of Mrs. Lestrange's house, where he alighted and dismissed his cab. The cabman touched his hat and said it was a fine day and seasonable weather for the time of the year. "Aye," replied Gabriel Cassilis mechanically, "a fine day and seasonable weather for the time of the year." And as he walked along under the lime trees, he found himself saying over again, as if it was the burden of a song, "A fine day and seasonable weather for the time of the year." Chapter 40. How green are you and fresh in this old world. On the morning of the garden party, Joseph Jagnel called on Lawrence Culquehown. "I have 2 or 3 things to say," he began, "if you can give me 5 minutes. 20, said Lawrence. "Now then." He threw himself back in his easiest chair and prepared to listen. "I am in the way of hearing things sometimes," Joseph said. And I heard a good deal yesterday about Mr. Gabriel Casserly's. What? Said Lawrence aghast. He surely has not been telling all the world about it. I think we are talking of different things, Joseph answered after a pause. Don't tell me what you mean, but what I mean is that there is an uneasy feeling about Gabriel Casserly's eyes. In what way? Well, they say he is strange, does not see people, does not open letters, and is evidently suffering from some mental distress. Yes. And when such a man as Gabriel Casserly's is in mental distress, money is at the bottom of it. Generally, not always. It was against my advice that you invested any of your money by his direction. I invested the whole of it, and all Philly's too. Mr. Casserly's has the investment of our little all, Lawrence added, laughing. But the lawyer looked grave. Don't do it, he said. Get it in your own hands again, let it lie safely in the 3%. What has a pigeon like you to do among the city hawks? And Miss Fleming's money too. Let it be put away safely and give her what she wants, a modest and sufficient income without risk. I believe you are right, Jagnal. In fact, I am sure you are right, but Casserly's would have it. He talked me into an ambition for good investments which I never felt before. I will ask him to sell out for me and go back to the old 3% and railway shares, which is what I have been brought up to. On the other hand, you are quite wrong about his mental distress. That is, I happen to know you are a lawyer and will not talk. It is not due to money matters. And Gabriel Casserly's is, for what I know, as keen a hand as ever at piling up the dollars. The money is all safe, of that I am quite certain. Well, if you think so, but don't let him keep it, said Joseph the doubter. After all, why not get 8 and 9%, if you can? Because it isn't safe and because you ought not to expect it. What do you want with more money than you have got? However, I have told you what men say. There is another thing. I am sorry to say that my brothers have made fools of themselves, and I am come to apologize for them. Don't, if it is disagreeable, my dear fellow. It is not very disagreeable, and I would rather. They are 50, but they are not wise. In fact, they have lived so much out of the world that they do not understand things. And so they went down and proposed for the hand of your ward, Phyllis Fleming. Oh, both of them, and did she accept? The absurd thing is that I cannot discover which of them wished to be the bridegroom, nor which Phyllis thought it was. She is quite confused about the whole matter. However, they went away and thought one of them was accepted, which explains a great deal of innuendo and reference to some unknown subject of mirth which I have observed lately. I say one of them, because I find it impossible to ascertain which of them was the man. Well, whether they were conscience-stricken or whether they repented, I do not know, but they went back to Twickenham and solemnly repudiated the engagement. And Phyllis. She laughed at them, of course. Do not fear, she wasn't in the least annoyed. I shall speak to my brothers this evening. Colquhoun thought of the small, fragile-looking pair, and inwardly hoped that their brother would be gentle with them. And there is another thing, Colquhoun. Do you want to see your ward married? To Jack Dunkirk? Yes. Not yet. I want her to have her little fling first. Why, the poor child is only just out of the nursery, and he wants to marry her offhand. It's cruel. Let her see the world for a year, and then we will consider it. Jagnal, I wish I could marry the girl myself. So do I, said Joseph with a sigh. I fell in love with her, said Lawrence, at first sight. That is why, he added in his laziest tones, I suppose that is why I told Jack Dunkirk not to go there any more. But he has gone there again, and he has proposed to her, I hear, and she has accepted him, so that I can't marry her and you can't, and we are a brace of fogies. And what have you said to Mr. Dunkirk? I acted the jealous guardian, and I ordered him not to call on my ward any more for the present. I shall see how Phyllis takes it, and give in, of course, if she makes a fuss. Then Beck has been here offering to hand over all his money to Jack, because he loves the young man. Quixotic, said the lawyer. Yes, the end of it will be a wedding, of course. You and I may shake a leg at it if we like. As for me, I never can marry anyone, and as for you. As for me, I never thought of marrying her. I only remarked that I had fallen in love, as you say, with her. That's no matter to anybody. Well, things go on as they like, not as we like. What nonsense it is to say that man is master of his fate. Now, what I should like would be to get rid of the reason that prevents my marrying, to put Jack Dunkirk into the water butt and sit on the lid, and then for Phyllis to fall in love with me. After that, strawberries and cream with a little champagne for the rest of my Methuselah-like career. And I can't get any of these things, master of his fate. Have you heard of the coping stone chapter? It is found. Agatha told me something in a disjointed way. What is the effect of it? Joseph laughed. It is all torn up but the last page. A righteous retribution, because if Phillies had been taught to read this would not have happened. Now I suspect the will must be set aside, and the money will mostly go to Gabriel Cassilis, the nearest of kin, who doesn't want it. Chapter 41. La langue des femmes est leur épée, et elles ne la laissent pas rouler. The grounds of the house formed a parallelogram, of which the longer sides were parallel with the river. In the northeast corner stood the house itself, its front facing west. It was not a large house, as has been explained. A conservatory was built against nearly the whole length of the front. The lawns and flower beds spread to west and south, sloping down to the river's edge. The opposite angle was occupied by stables, kitchen garden and boat house. Gabriel Cassilis approached it from the east. An iron railing and a low hedge along which were planted limes, laburnums and lilacs separated the place from the road. But before reaching the gate, in fact, at the corner of the kitchen garden, he could, himself unseen, look through the trees and observe the party. They were all there. He saw Mrs. L'Estrange Phillies, his own wife. Heavens, how calm and cold she looked, and how beautiful he thought her. With half a dozen other ladies. The men were few. There was the curate. He was dangling round Phillies and wore an expression of holiness out for a holiday, which is always so charming in these young men. Gabriel Cassilis also noticed that he was casting eyes of longing at the young lady. There was Lawrence Colquhoun. Gabriel Cassilis looked everywhere for him till he saw him, lying beneath a tree, his head on his hand. He was not talking to Victoria, nor was he looking at her. On the contrary, he was watching Phillies. There was Captain Lads. He was talking to one of the young ladies, and he was looking at Phillies. The young lady evidently did not like this. And there was Gilead Beck. He was standing apart, talking to Mrs. L'Estrange, with his hands in his pockets, leaning against a tree. But he, too, was casting furtive glances at Phillies. They all seemed somehow looking at the girl. There was no special reason why they should look at her, except that she was so bright, so fresh and so charming for the eye to rest upon. The other girls were as well dressed, but they were nowhere compared with Phillies. The lines of their figures perhaps were not so fine, the shape of their heads more commonplace, their features not so delicate, their pose less graceful. There are some girls who go well together. Helena and Hermia are a foil to each other, but when Desdemona shows all other beauties pale like lesser lights, and the other beauties do not like it. Said one of the fair guests to another, "What do they see in her?" "I cannot tell," replied her friend. "She seems to me more farouche than ever." For having decided that farouche was the word to express poor Phillies's distinguishing quality, there was no longer any room for question, and farouche she continued to be. If there is anything that Phillies never was, it is that quality of fierce shy wildness which requires the adjective farouche, but the word stuck because it sounded well. To this day, to be sure, it is only a 12-month since, the girls say still, "Oh yes, Phillies Fleming. She was pretty but extremely farouche." Gabriel Cassilis stood by the hedge and looked through the trees. He has come all the way from town to attend this party, and now he hesitated at the very gates, for he became conscious of two things. First, that the old feeling of not finding his words was upon him again, and secondly, that he was not exactly dressed for a festive occasion. Like most city men who have long remained bachelors, Gabriel Cassilis was careful of his personal appearance. He considered a garden party as an occasion demanding something special. Now he not only wore his habitual pepper-and-salt suit, but the coat in which he wrote at his office, a comfortable, easy old frock, a little baggy at the elbows. His mind was strung to such an intense pitch that such a trifling objection as his dress, because Gabriel Cassilis never looked other than a gentleman, appeared to him insuperable. He withdrew from the hedge and retraced his steps. Presently he came to a lane. He left the road and turned down the path. He found himself by the river. He sat down under a tree and began to think. He thought of the time when his lonely life was wearisome to him, when he longed for a wife and a house of his own. He remembered how he pictured a girl who would be his darling, who would return his caresses and love him for his own sake. And how, when he met Victoria Pengelly, his thoughts changed, and he pictured that girl, stately and statuesque, at the head of the table. There would be no pettings and caressings from her, that was quite certain. On the other hand, there would be a woman of whom he would be proud, one who would wear his wealth properly. And a woman of good family, well connected all round. There were no caresses, he remembered now. There was the coldest acceptance of him, and there had been no caresses since. But he had been proud of her, and as for her honour, how was it possible that the doubt should arise? That man must be himself distinctly of the lower order of men who would begin by doubting or suspecting his wife. To end in this, doubt so strong as to be almost certainty, suspicion like a knife cutting at his heart, his brain clouded, and he himself driven to creep down clandestinely to watch his wife. He sat there till the June sun began to sink in the west. The river was covered with the evening craft. They were manned by the young city men, but just beginning the worship of Mammon, who would have looked with envy upon the figure sitting motionless in the shade by the river's edge had they known who he was. Presently he roused himself and looked at his watch. It was past 7. Perhaps the party would be over by this time. He could go home with his wife. It would be something at least to be with her, to keep her from that other man. He rose, his brain in a tumult, and repaired once more to his point of vantage at the hedge. The lawn was empty, there was no one there, but he saw his own carriage in the yard, and therefore his wife was not yet gone. In the garden no one. He crept in softly and looked round him. No one saw him enter the place, and he felt something like a burglar as he walked, with a stealthy step which he vainly tried to make confident across the lawn. 2 ways of entrance stood open before him. One was the porch of the house, covered with creepers and hung with flowers. The door stood open, and beyond it was the hall, looking dark from the bright light outside. He heard voices within. Another way was by the conservatory, the door of which was also open. He looked in. Among the flowers and vines there stood a figure he knew, his wife's. But she was alone, and she was listening. On her face was an expression which he had never seen there and never dreamed of. Her features were distorted, her hands were closed in a tight clutch, her arms were stiffened, but she was trembling. What was she doing? To whom was she listening? He hesitated a moment, and then he stepped through the porch into the hall. The voices came from the right, in fact, from the morning room, Phyllis's room, which opened by its single window upon the lawn, and by its 2 doors into the hall on one side and the conservatory on the other. And Gabriel Casserly's, like his wife, listened. He put off his hat, placed his umbrella in the stand, and stood in attitude in case he should be observed, to push open the door and step in. He was so abject in his jealousy that he actually did not feel the disgrace and degradation of the act. He was so keen and eager to lose no word, that he leaned his head to the half-open door, and stood, his long, thin figure trembling with excitement, like some listener in a melodrama of the transpontine stage. There were 2 persons in the room, and one was a woman, and they were talking together. One was Lawrence Culquehown, and the other was Phyllis Fleming. Culquehown was not, according to his wont, lying on a sofa, nor sitting in the easiest of the chairs. He was standing, and he was speaking in an earnest voice. "When I saw you first," he said, "you were little Phyllis, a wee toddler of 6 or 7. I went away and forgot all about you, almost forgot your very existence, Phyllis, till the news of Mr. Dyson's death met me on my way home again. I fear that I have neglected you since I came home, but I have been worried." "What has worried you, Lawrence?" asked the girl. She was sitting on the music stool before the piano, and as she spoke she turned from the piano, her fingers resting silently on the notes. She was dressed for the party, which was over now, and the guests departed, in a simple muslin costume, light and airy, which became her well, and in her hair she had placed a flower. There were flowers all about the room, flowers at the open window, flowers in the conservatory beyond, flowers on the bright green lawns beyond. "How pretty you are, Phyllis," answered her guardian. He touched her cheek with his finger as she sat. "I am your guardian," he said, as if in apology. "And you have been worried about things," she persisted. "Agatha says you never care what happens." "Agatha is right, as a rule. In one case of which she knows nothing, she is wrong. Tell me, Phyllis, is there anything you want in the world that I can get for you?" "I think I have everything," she said, laughing, "and what you will not give me I shall wait for till I am 21. "You mean—" "I mean Jack Dunquerque, Lawrence. Only a short month ago, and Jack Dunquerque was her friend. She could speak of him openly and friendly, without change of voice or face. Now she blushed, and her voice trembled as she uttered his name. That is one of the outward and visible signs of an inward and spiritual state known to the most elementary observers. I wanted to speak about him. Phyllis, you are very young, you have seen nothing of the world, you know no other men. All I ask you is to wait. Do not give your promise to this man till you have at least had an opportunity of comparing, of learning your own mind." She shook her head. "I have already given my promise," she said. "But it is a promise that may be recalled," he urged. "Dunquerque is a gentleman, he will not hold you to your word when he feels that he ought not to have taken it from you. Phyllis, you do not know yourself. You have no idea of what it is that you have given or its value. How can I tell you the truth?" "I think you mean the best for me, Lawrence," she said, "but the best is Jack." Then she began to speak quite low, so that the listeners heard nothing. See, Lawrence, you are kind, and I can tell you all without being ashamed. I think of Jack all day long and all night. I pray for him in the morning and in the evening. When he comes near me, I tremble. I feel that I must obey him if he were to order me in anything. I have no more command of myself when he is with me. Stop, Phyllis, Lawrence interposed. You must not tell me any more. I was trying to act for the best, but I will make no further opposition. See, my dear, he took her hand in his in a tender and kindly way. If I write to Jack Dunkirk today, and tell the villain he may come and see you whenever he likes, and that he shall marry you whenever you like, will that do for you? She started to her feet and threw her left hand, Lawrence still holding the right, upon his shoulder, looking him full in the face. Will it do, oh Lawrence? Agatha always said you were the kindest man in the world, and forgive me. I did not believe it, I could not understand it. Oh Jack, Jack, we shall be so happy, so happy. He loves me, Lawrence, as much as I love him. The listeners in the greenhouse and the hall craned their necks, but they could hear little, because the girl spoke low. Does he love you as much as you love him, Phyllis? Does he love you 1,000 times better than you can understand? Why, child, you do not know what love means. Perhaps women never do quite realize what it means. Only go on believing that he loves you and love him in return, and all will be well with you. I do believe it, Lawrence, and I love him too. Looking through the flowers and the leaves of the conservatory, glared a face upon the pair strangely out of harmony with the peace which breathed in the atmosphere of the place. A face violently distorted by passion, a face in which every evil feeling was at work, a face dark with rage. Phyllis might have seen the face had she looked in that direction, but she did not. She held Lawrence's hand, and she was shyly pressing it in gratitude. Phyllis, said Lawrence hoarsely, Jack Dunkirk is a lucky man. We all love you, my dear, and I almost as much as Jack. But I am too old for you, and besides, he cleared his throat and spoke more distinctly. I do love you, however, Phyllis. A man could not be long beside you without loving you. There was a movement and a rustle in the leaves. The man at the door stood bewildered. What was it all about? Culquhoun and a woman not his wife talking of love. What love? What woman? And his wife in the conservatory, looking as he never saw her look before and listening. What did it all mean? What thing was coming over him? He pressed his hand to his forehead, trying to make out what it all meant, for he seemed to be in a dream. And as before, while he tried to shape the words in his mind for some sort of an excuse or a reassurance to himself, he found that no words came, or, if any, then the wrong words. The house was very quiet. No sounds came from any part of it. The servants were resting in the kitchen. The mistress of the house was resting in her room after the party. No voices but the gentle talk of the girl and her guardian. Kiss me, Phyllis, said Lawrence. Then let me hold you in my arms for once, because you are so sweet, and I am your guardian, you know, and we all love you. He drew her gently by the hands. She made no resistance. It seemed to her right that her guardian should kiss her if he wished. She did not know how the touch of her hand, the light in her eyes, the sound of her voice, were stirring in the man before her depths that he thought long ago buried and put away, awakening once more the possibilities at 40 of a youthful love. His lips were touching her forehead, her face was close to his. He held her two hands tight, when the crash of a falling flower-pot startled him, and Victoria Casserly stood before him. Panting, gasping for breath, with hands clenched and eyes distended, a living statue of the femina demens. For a moment she paused to take breath, and then with a wave of her hand which was grand because it was natural and worthy of Rachel. Because you may see it any day among the untutored beauties of Whitecapel, among the gypsy camps, or in the villages where Hindu women live and quarrel, Victoria Casserly's for once in her life was herself, and acted superbly, because she did not act at all. Victoria, the word came from Lawrence. Phyllis, with a little cry of terror, clung tightly to her guardian's arm. Leave him, cried the angry woman. Do you hear? Leave him. Better go, Phyllis, said Lawrence. At the prospect of battle, the real nature of the man asserted itself. He drew himself erect, and met her wild eyes with a steady gaze, which had neither terror nor surprise in it, a gaze such as a mad doctor might practice upon his patients, a look which calms the wildest outbreaks, because it sees in them nothing but what it expected to find, and is only sorry. No, she shall not go, said Victoria, sweeping her skirts behind her with a splendid movement from her feet. She shall not go until she has heard me first. You dare to make love to this girl, this schoolgirl, before my very eyes. She shall know our secret. Victoria, said Lawrence calmly, you do not understand what you are saying, our secret. Say your secret and be careful. The door moved an inch or two. The man standing behind it was shaking in every limb. Their secret, her secret. He was going to learn at last, he was going to find the truth, he was going, and here a sudden thought struck him that he had neglected his affairs of late, and that this business once got through, he must look into things again. A thought without words because somehow just then he had no words, he had forgotten them all. The writer of the anonymous letters had done much mischief, as she hoped to do. People who write anonymous letters generally contrive so much. Unhappily, the beginning of mischief is like the boring of a hole in a dam or dike, because very soon, instead of a trickling rivulet of water, you get a gigantic inundation. Nothing is easier than to have your revenge, only it is so very difficult to calculate the after consequences of revenge. If the writer of the letters had known what was going to happen in consequence, most likely they would never have been written. Their secret, her secret. He listened with all his might, but Victoria, his wife Victoria, spoke out clearly. He could hear without straining his ears. "Be careful," repeated Lawrence. "I shall not be careful, the time is past for care. You have sneered and scoffed at me, you have insulted me, you have refused almost to know me, all that I have borne, but this I will not bear." "Phyllis Fleming." She turned to the girl. Phyllis did not shrink or cower before her, on the contrary she stood like Lawrence, calm and quiet, to face the storm, whatever storm might be brewing. "This man takes you in his arms and kisses you, he says he loves you, he dares to tell you he loves you. No doubt you are flattered. You have had the men round you all day long, and now you have the best of them at your feet alone when they are gone. Well, the man you want to catch, the excellent party you and Agatha would like to trap, the man who stands there." "Victoria, there is still time to stop," said Lawrence calmly. "That man is my husband." Phyllis looked from one to the other, understanding nothing. The man stood quietly stroking his great beard with his fingers, and looking straight at Mrs. Cassilis. "My husband, we were married 6 years ago and more. We were married in Scotland privately, but he is my husband, and 5 days after our wedding he left me. Is that true?" "Perfectly. You have forgotten nothing, except the reason of my departure. If you think it worthwhile troubling Phyllis with that, why?" "We quarrelled, that was the reason. He used cruel and bitter language. He gave me back my liberty. We separated, Phyllis, after a row, the like of which you may conceive, by remembering that Mrs. Cassilis was then 6 years younger, and even more ready for such encounters than at present. We separated. We agreed that things should go on as if the marriage, which was no marriage, had never taken place. Janet, the maid, was to be trusted. She stayed with her mistress, I went abroad. And then I heard by accident that my wife had taken the liberty I gave her in its fullest sense by marrying again. Then I came home because I thought that chapter was closed, but it was not, you see, and for her sake I wish I had stayed in America." Mrs. Cassilis listened as if she did not hear a word, then she went on. "He is my husband still. I can claim him when I want him, and I claim him now. I say, Lawrence, so long as I live you shall marry no other woman. You are mine, whatever happens you are mine." The sight of the man, callous, immovable, suddenly seemed to terrify her. She sank weeping at his knees. "Lawrence, forgive me, take me away. I never loved anyone but you, forgive me." He made no answer or any sign. "Let me go with you somewhere out of this place. Let us go away together, we two. I have never loved anyone but you, never anyone but you. She broke into a passion of sobs. When she looked up it was to meet the white face of Gabriel Cassilis. He was stooping over her, his hands spread out helplessly, his form quivering, his lips trying to utter something, but no sound came through them. Beyond stood Lawrence, still with the look of watchful determination which had broken down her rage. Then she sprang to her feet. "You hear, then you know all, it is true, that is my legal husband. For 2 years and more my life has been a lie. Stand back and let me go to my husband." But he stood between Colquhoun and herself. Lawrence saw with a sudden terror that something had happened to the man. He expected an outburst of wrath, but no wrath came. Gabriel Cassilis turned his head from one to the other, and presently said, in a trembling voice, "A fine day, and seasonable weather for the time of year." "Good God," cried Lawrence, "you have destroyed his reason." Gabriel Cassilis shook his head, and began again. "A fine day and seasonable." Here he threw himself upon the nearest chair, and buried his face in his hands. Chapter 42. Then a babbled of green fields. And then there was silence. Which of them was to speak? Not the woman who had wrought this mischief, not the man who knew of the wickedness but had not spoken, not the innocent girl who only perceived that something dreadful, something beyond the ordinary run of dreadful events had happened, and that Victoria Cassilis looked out of her senses. Lawrence Colquhoun stood unmoved by her tears, his face was hardened, it bore a look beneath which the guilty woman cowered, yet she looked at him and not at her husband. Presently Colquhoun spoke, his voice was harsh and his words were a command. "Go home," he said to Victoria, "there is no more mischief for you to do, go." She obeyed without a word. She threw the light wrapper which she carried on her arm round her slender neck, and walked away, restored to outward seeming to all her calm and stately coldness. The coachman and the footman noticed nothing. If any of her acquaintances passed her on the road, they saw no change in her. The woman was impassive and impenetrable. Did she love Colquhoun? No one knows. She loved to feel that she had him in her power. She was driven to a mad jealousy when that power slipped quite away, and although she had broken the vows which both once swore to keep, she could not bear even to think that he should do the same. And she did despise her husband, the man of shares, companies, and stocks. But could she love Colquhoun? Such a woman may feel the passion of jealousy. She may rejoice in the admiration which gratifies her vanity, but she is far too cold and selfish for love. It is an artful fable of the ancients which makes Narcissus pine away and die for the loss of his own image, for thereby they teach the great lesson that he who loves himself destroys himself. The carriage wheels crunched over the gravel, and Gabriel Cassilis raised a pale and trembling face, a face with so much desolation and horror, such a piteous gaze of questioning reproach at Colquhoun, that the man's heart melted within him. He seemed to have grown old suddenly, his hair looked whiter, he trembled as one who has the palsy, and his eyes mutely asked the question, "Is this thing true?" Lawrence Colquhoun made answer. His voice was low and gentle, his eyes were filled with tears. "It is true, Mr. Cassilis. God knows I would have spared you the knowledge, but it is true." Gabriel Cassilis opened his lips as if to speak, but he refrained, stopping suddenly, because he recollected that he could no longer utter what he wished to say. Then he touched his mouth with his fingers like a dumb man. He was worse than a dumb man who cannot speak at all, because his tongue, if he allowed it, uttered words which had no connection with his thoughts. Men that have been called possessed of the devil have knelt at altars, uttering blasphemous impieties when their souls were full of prayer. "Do you understand me, Mr. Cassilis? Do you comprehend what I am saying?" He nodded his head. Colquhoun took a piece of notepaper from the writing table and laid it before him with a pencil. Mr. Cassilis grasped the pencil eagerly and began to write. From his fingers, as from his tongue, came the sentence which he did not wish to write. "A fine day and seasonable weather for the time of year." He looked at this result with sorrowful heart, and showed it to Colquhoun, shaking his head. "Good heavens," cried Colquhoun, "his mind is gone." Gabriel Cassilis touched him on the arm and shook his head. "He understands you, Lawrence," said Phyllis, "but he cannot explain himself. Something has gone wrong with him which we do not know." Gabriel Cassilis nodded gratefully to Phyllis. "Then, Mr. Cassilis," Colquhoun began, "it is right that you should know all. 6 years ago I followed Victoria Pengelly into Scotland. We were married privately at a registrar's office under assumed names. If you ever want to know where and by what names, you have only to ask me, and I will tell you. There were reasons, she said. I never quite understood what they were, but she chose to be a Phil Romanesque at the time. Why the marriage should be kept secret. After the wedding ceremony, such as it was, she left the office with her maid, who was the only witness, and returned to the friends with whom she was staying. I met her every day, but always in that house and among other people. A few days passed. She would not, for some whim of her own, allow the marriage to be disclosed. We quarrelled for that and other reasons, my fault possibly. Good God, what a honeymoon! To meet the woman you love, your bride, in society, if for half an hour alone, then in the solitude of open observation, to quarrel like people who have been married for 40 years. Well, perhaps it was my fault. On the 5th day we agreed to let things be as if they had never been. I left my bride, who was not my wife, in anger. We used bitter words, perhaps I the bitterest, and when we parted I bade her go back to her old life as if nothing had been promised on either side. I said she should be free, that I would never claim the power and the rights given me by a form of words, that she might marry again, that, to leave her the more free, I would go away and never return till she was married, or till she gave me leave. I was away for 4 years, and then I saw the announcement of her marriage in the paper and I returned. That is the bare history, Mr. Cassilis. Since my return, on my honour as a gentleman, you have had no cause for jealousy in my own behaviour towards your wife, not mine. Remember, Mr. Cassilis, whatever else may be said, she never was my wife, and yet in the eye of the law I suppose she is my wife still, and with all my heart I pity you. He stopped and looked at the victim of the crime. Gabriel Cassilis was staring helplessly from him to Phillies. Did he understand? Not entirely, I think. Yet the words which he had heard fell upon his heart softly and soothed him in his trouble. At last his eyes rested on Phillies, as if asking, as men do in times of trouble, for the quick comprehension of a woman. "What can I do, Mr. Cassilis?" asked the girl. "If you cannot speak, will you make some sign, any little sign that I can understand?" She remembered that among her lesson books was a dictionary. She put that into his hand and asked him to show her in the dictionary what he wished to say. He took the book in his trembling hands, turned over the leaves, and presently, finding the page he wanted, ran his fingers down the lines till they rested on a word. Phillies read it, spelling it out in her pretty little schoolgirl fashion. "Siclence lence silence. Is that what you wish to say, Mr. Cassilis?" He nodded. "Silence," repeated Lawrence. "For all our sakes it is the best, the only thing. Phillies, tell no one what you have heard, not even Agatha, not even Jack Dunkirk. Or if you tell Jack Dunkirk, send him to me directly afterwards. Do you promise, child?" "I promise, Lawrence. I will tell no one but Jack, and I shall ask him first if he thinks I ought to tell him another person's secret." "Thank you, Phillies, Mr. Cassilis, there are only we three and one more. You may trust Phillies when she promises a thing, you may trust me for my own sake, you may, I hope, trust that other person. And as for me, it is my intention to leave England in a week. I deeply regret that I ever came back to this country." A week was too far ahead for Mr. Cassilis to look forward to in his agitation. Clearly the one thing in his mind at the moment, the one possible thing, was concealment. He took the dictionary again and found the word home. "Will you let me take you home, sir?" Lawrence asked. He nodded again. There was no resentment in his face, and none in his feeble, confiding manner when he took Lawrence's arm and leaned upon it as he crawled out to the carriage. Only one sign of feeling. He took Phillies by the hand and kissed her. When he had kissed her, he laid his finger on her lips, and she understood his wish that no one should learn this thing. "Not even Agatha, Phillies," said Lawrence. "Forget if you can, and if you cannot, keep silence." They drove into town together, these men with a secret between them. Lawrence made no further explanations. What was there to explain? The one who suffered the most sat upright, looking straight before him in mute suffering. It is a long drive from Twickenham to Kensington Palace Gardens. When they arrived, Mr. Cassilis was too weak to step out of the carriage. They helped him, Lawrence Colquhoun and a footman, into the hall. He was feeble with long fasting as much as from the effects of this dreadful shock. They carried him to his study. Among the servants who looked on was Tomlinson, the middle-aged maid with the harsh face. She knew that her bolt had fallen at last, and she saw, too, that it had fallen upon the wrong person, for upstairs sat her mistress, calm, cold, and collected. She came home looking pale and a little worn, fatigued perhaps with the constant round of engagements, though the season was little more than half over. She dressed in gentle silence which Tomlinson could not understand. She went down to dinner alone, and presently went to her drawing-room, where she sat in a window and thought. There Colquhoun found her. "I have told him all," he said. "Your words told him only half, and yet too much. You were never my wife, as you know, and never will be, though the law may make you take my name. Cruel and heartless woman, to gratify an insensate jealousy you have destroyed your husband." Is he dead?" she cried, almost as if she wished he were. "No, he is not dead, he is struck with some fit, he cannot speak. Learn now that your jealousy was without foundation. Phillies will marry Dunkirk. As for me, I can never marry, as you know." "He is not dead," she echoed, taking no notice of the last words. Indeed, Phillies was quite out of her thoughts now. "Does he wish to see me?" "No, you must not at present attempt to see him." "What will they do to me, Lawrence?" she asked again. "What can they do? I did not mean him to hear, it was all to frighten you." "To frighten me? What they can do, Mrs. Cassilis, is to put you in the prisoner's box and me in the witness box. What he wants to do, so far as we can yet understand, is to keep silence." "What is the good of that? He will cry his wrongs all over the town, and Phillies will tell everybody." "Phillies will tell no one, not even Agatha. It was lucky that Agatha heard nothing, she was upstairs lying down after her party. Will you keep silence?" "Of course I shall. What else is there for me to do?" "For the sake of your husband, for the sake of your boy." "It is for my own sake, Lawrence," she interrupted coldly. "I beg your pardon. I ought to have known by this time that you would have acted for your own sake only. Victoria, it was an evil day for me when I met you. It was a worse day when I consented to a secret marriage which was no marriage, when there was no reason for any secrecy. It was the worst day of all when I answered your letter and came here to see you. Every day we have met has produced more recrimination. That would not have mattered, but for the mischief our meeting has wrought upon your husband. I pray that we may never in this world meet again. He was gone, and Victoria Cassilis has not met him since, nor do I think now that she ever will meet him again. The summer night closed in. The moonlight came up and shone upon the park before her, laying silvery patches of light in 10 of thousands upon the young leaves of the trees, and darkening the shadows a deeper black by way of contrast. They brought her tea and lights, then they came for orders. There were none, she would not go out that night. At 11 Tomlinson came. I want nothing, Tomlinson, you need not wait up, I shall not want you this evening. Yes, madam, no, madam, Mr. Cassilis is asleep, madam. Let someone sit up with him, see to that, Tomlinson, and don't let him be disturbed. I will sit up with him myself, madam. Tomlinson was anxious to get to the bottom of the thing. What mischief had been done, and how far was it her own doing? To persons who want revenge these are very important questions, when mischief has actually been perpetrated. Then Victoria was left alone. In that great house with its troop of servants and nurses with her husband and child, there was no one who cared to know what she was doing. The master was not popular because he simply regarded every servant as a machine, but at least he was just and he paid well, and the house, from the point of view likely to be taken by Mr. Plush and Miss Hairpin, was a comfortable one. The mistress of the house was unpopular, her temper at times was intolerable, her treatment of servants showed no consideration, and the womenfolk regarded the neglect of her own child with the horror of such neglect, in which the Englishwoman of all ranks is trained. So she was alone and remained alone. The hands of the clock went round and round, the moon went down, and over the garden lay the soft sepia twilight of June. The lamp on the little table at her elbow went out, but she sat still, hands crossed in her lap, looking out of window and thinking. She saw, but she did not feel the wickedness of it, a cold and selfish girl ripening into a cold and selfish woman, one to whom the outer world was as a panorama of moving objects, meaning nothing, and having no connection with herself. Like one blind, deaf and dumb, she moved among the mobs who danced and sang, or who grovelled and wept. She had no tears to help the sufferers and no smiles to encourage the happy. She had never been able to sympathize with the acting of a theatre or the puppets of a novel. She was so cold that she was not even critical. It seems odd, but it is really true, that a critic may be actually too cold. She saw a mind that, like the Indian devotee, was occupied forever in contemplating itself. She saw beauty which would have been irresistible had there been one gleam, just one gleam of womanly tenderness. She saw one man after the other first, attracted and then repelled, and then she came to the one man who was not repelled. There was once an unfortunate creature who dared to make love to Diana. His fate is recorded in Lempriere's dictionary, also in Dr. Smith's later and more expensive work. Lawrence Colquhoun resembled that swain, and his fate was not unlike the classical punishment. She went through the form of marriage with him, and then she drove him from her by the cold wind of her own intense selfishness, a very mistral. When he was gone she began to regret a slave of such uncomplaining slavishness. Well, no one knew except Janet. Janet did not talk. It was rather a struggle, she remembered, to take Gabriel Cassilis, rather a struggle, because Lawrence Colquhoun might come home and tell the story, not because there was anything morally wrong. She was most anxious to see him when he did come home, out of curiosity, out of jealousy, out of a desire to know whether her old power was gone. Out of fear, out of that reason which makes a criminal seek out from time to time the scene and accomplices of his crime, and for the 1,000 reasons which make up a selfish woman's code of conduct. It was 3 o'clock and daylight when she discovered that she had really thought the whole thing over from the beginning, and that there was nothing more to think about, except the future, a distasteful subject to all sinners. After all, she summed up as she rose to go to bed, it is as well. Lawrence and I should never have got along, he is too selfish, much too selfish. Downstairs they were watching over the stricken man. The doctor came and felt his pulse. He also looked wise and wrote things in Latin on a paper which he gave to a servant. Then he went away and said he would come in the morning again. He was a great doctor, with a title and quite believed to know everything, but he did not know what had befallen this patient. When Gabriel Cassilis awoke there was some confusion in his mind, and his brain was wandering. At least it appeared so, because what he said had nothing to do with any possible wish or thought. He rambled at large and at length, and then he grew angry, and then he became suddenly sorrowful and sighed. Then he became perfectly silent. The confused babble of speech ceased as suddenly as it had come, and since that morning Gabriel Cassilis has not spoken. It was at 9:30 that his secretary called, simultaneously with the doctor. He heard something from the servants, and pushed into the room where his chief was lying. The eyes of the sick man opened languidly and fell upon his first officer, but they expressed no interest and asked no question. "Ah," sighed Mr. Mowley, in the impatience of a sympathy which has but little time to spare. "Will he recover, doctor?" No doubt, this way, my dear sir." He led the secretary out of the room. "Hush, he understands what is said. This is no ordinary seizure. Has he received any shock?" "Shock enough to kill 30 men, said the secretary. "Where was he yesterday? Why did he not say something, do something to avert the disaster?" "Oh, then the shock has been of a financial kind. I gathered from Mr. Colquhoun that it was of a family nature, something sudden and distressing." "Family nature," echoed the secretary. "Who ever heard of Mr. Cassilis worrying himself about family matters? No, sir, when a man is ruined he has no time to bother about family matters." "Ruined, the great Mr. Gabriel Cassilis ruined?" "I should say so, and I ought to know. They say so in the city, they will say so tonight in the papers. If he were well and able to face things there might be, no, even then there could be no hope. Settling day this very morning, and a pretty settling it is." "Whatever day it is," said the doctor, "I cannot have him disturbed. You may return in 3 or 4 hours if you like, and then perhaps he may be able to speak to you. Just now leave him in peace." What had happened was this. When Mr. Cassilis caused to be circulated a certain pamphlet which we have heard of, impugning the resources of the Republic of El Dorado, he wished the stock to go down. It did go down, and he bought in so largely that he held 2 millions of the stock. Men in his position do not buy large quantities of stock without affecting the price. Stock exchange transactions are not secret, and El Dorado stock went up. This was what Gabriel Cassilis naturally desired. Also the letter of El Senor Don Belaco de la Carambola to the Times, showing the admirable way in which El Dorado loans were received and administered, helped. The stock went up from 64, at which price Gabriel Cassilis bought in, to 75, at which he should have sold. Had he done so at the right moment, he would have realized the very handsome sum of £260,000, but the trouble of the letters came, and prevented him from acting. While his mind was agitated by these, agitated, as we have seen, to such an extent that he could no longer think or work, or attend to any kind of business, there arrived for him telegram after telegram, in his own cipher from America. These lay unopened. It was disastrous because they announced beforehand the fact which only his correspondent knew: the El Dorado bonds were no longer to be paid. That fact was now public. It was made known by all the papers that El Dorado, having paid the interest out of the money borrowed, had no further resources whatever, and could pay no more. It was stated in leading articles that England should have known all along what a miserable country El Dorado is. The British public were warned too late not to trust in El Dorado promises any more, and the unfortunates who held El Dorado stock were actuated by one common impulse to sell, and no one would buy. It was absurd to quote El Dorado bonds at anything, and the great financier had to meet his engagements by finding the difference between stock at 64 and stock at next to nothing for 2 millions. Gabriel Cassilis was consequently ruined. When it became known that he had some sort of stroke, people said that it was the shock of the fatal news. He made the one mistake of an otherwise faultless career, they said to each other, in trusting El Dorado, and his brain could not stand the blow. When the secretary, who understood the cipher, came to open the letters and telegrams, he left off talking about the fatal shock of the news. It must have been something else, something he knew nothing of, because he saw the blow might have been averted, and the man's mind, clear enough when he went in for a great coup, had become unhinged during the few days before the smash. Ruined, Gabriel Cassilis knew nothing about the wreck of his life, as he lay upon his bed afraid to speak because he would only babble incoherently. All was gone from him: money, reputation, wife. He had no longer anything. The anonymous correspondent had taken all away. Chapter 43. This comes of airy visions and the whispers of demons like to angels. Brother, weep. Gilead Beck, returning from the Twickenham party before the explosion, found Jack Dunkirk waiting for him. As we have seen, he was not invited. "Tell me how she was looking," he cried. "Did she ask after me?" "Well, Mr. Dunkirk, I reckon you the most fortunate individual in the whole world. She looked like an angel, and she talked like a woman with pretty blushes, and yet she wasn't ashamed neither. Seems as if being ashamed isn't her strong point. And what has she got to be ashamed of? Did Colquhoun say anything? We had already got upon the subject, and I had ventured to make him a proposition. You see, Mr. Dunkirk, he grew confused and hesitated. Fact is, I want you to look at things just exactly as I do. I'm rich. I have struck Isle. That Isle is the mightiest special providence ever given to a single man. But it's given for purposes. And one of those purposes is that some of it's got to go to you. To me. To you, Mr. Dunkirk, who fired that shot, who delivered me from the grizzly. Why, lads did as much as I. Mr. Beck shook his head. Captain Lads is a fine fellow, he said. Steady as a rock is Captain Lads. There's nobody I'd rather march under if we'd the war to do all over again. But the Isle isn't for Captain Lads. It isn't for him that the golden butterfly fills me with yearnings. No, sir, I owe it all to you. You've saved my life. You've sought me out and gone about this city with me. You've put me up to ropes. You've taken me to that sweet creature's house and made her my friend. And Mrs. L'Estrange my friend too. If I was to turn away and forget you, I should deserve to lose that precious insect. He paused for a minute. I said to Mr. Colquhoun, Mr. Dunkirk shall have half of my pile and more if he wants it. Only you let him come back again to Miss Fleming. And he laughed in his easy way. There's no kind of man in the States like that Mr. Colquhoun, seems as if he never wants to get anything. He laughed and lay back on the grass, and then he said, My dear fellow, let Jack come back if he likes. There's no fighting against fate. Only let him have the decency not to announce his engagement till Phillies has had her first season. Then he drank some cider cup and lay back again. Mrs. Casserly's, she's a very superior woman that but a trifle cold, I should say, watched him whenever he spoke. She's got a game of her own, unless I am mistaken. But Beck, Jack gasped, I can't do this thing, I can't take your money. I guess, sir, you can, and I guess you will. Come, Mr. Dunkirk, say you won't go against Providence. There's a sweet young lady waiting for you, and a little mountain of dollars. But Jack shook his head. I thank you all the same, he said. I shall never forget your generosity, never, but that cannot be. We will leave it to Miss Fleming, said Gilead. What Miss Fleming says is to be shall be. He was interrupted by the arrival of 2 letters. The first was from Joseph Jagnel. It informed him that he had learned from his brothers that they had received money from him on account of work which he thought would never be done. He enclosed a cheque for the full amount, with many thanks for his kindness, and the earnest hope that he would advance nothing more. In the letter was his cheque for £400, the amount which the twins had borrowed during the 4 weeks of their acquaintance. Mr. Beck put the cheque in his pocket and opened the other letter. It was from Cornelius, and informed him that the poem could not possibly be finished in the time, that it was rapidly advancing, but that he could not pledge himself to completing the work by October. Also, that his brother Humphrey found himself in the same position as regarded the picture. He ended by the original statement that art cannot be forced. Mr. Beck laughed. Not straight men, Mr. Dunkirk. I suspected it first when they backed out at the dinner and left me to do the talk. While they may be high-toned, whole-souled and talented, but give me the man who works. Now, Mr. Dunkirk, if you please, we'll go and have some dinner and you shall talk about Miss Fleming. And the day after tomorrow, you note that down, I've asked Mrs. L'Estrange and Miss Phillies to breakfast. Captain Lads is coming and Mr. Colquhoun, and you shall sit next to her. Mrs. Casserly's is coming too. When I asked her, she wanted to know if Mr. Colquhoun was to be there. I said yes. Then she wanted to know if Phillies was to be there. I said yes. Then she set her lips hard and said, I will come, Mr. Beck. She isn't happy, that lady. She's got something on her mind. That evening Joseph Jagnel had an unpleasant duty to perform. It was at dinner that he spoke. The twins were just taking their first glass of port. He had been quite silent through dinner, eating little. Now he looked from one to the other without a word. They changed colour. Instinctively they knew what was coming. He said with a gulp, I am sorry to find that my brothers have not been acting honourably. What is this, Brother Humphrey? Asked Cornelius. I do not know, Brother Cornelius, said the artist. I will tell you, said Joseph, what they have done. They made a disingenuous attempt to engage the affections of a rich young lady for the sake of her money. If Humphrey loved the girl, began Cornelius. If Cornelius was devoted to Phillies Fleming, began Humphrey. I was not Humphrey, said Cornelius. No such thing, and I told you so. I never did love her, said Humphrey. I always said it was you. This was undignified. I do not care which it was, it belongs to both. Then you went down to her again under the belief that she was engaged to the Lord knows which of you, and solemnly broke it off. Neither spoke this time. Another thing, I regret to find that my brothers, having made a contract for certain work with Mr. Gilead Beck, and having been partly paid in advance, are not executing the work. There, Joseph, said Humphrey, waving his hand as if this was a matter on quite another footing, you must excuse us. We know what is right in art if we know nothing else. Art, Joseph, cannot be forced. Cornelius murmured assent. We have our dignity to stand upon, we retreat with dignity. We say, we will not be forced, we will give the world our best. Good, said Joseph, that is very well, but where is the money? Neither answered. I have returned that money, but it is a large sum and you must repay me in part. Understand me, brothers, you may stay here as long as I live. I shall never ask more of you than to respect the family name. There was a time when you promised great things and I believed in you. It is only quite lately that I have learned to my sorrow that all this promise has been for years a pretense. You sleep all day, you call it work. You habitually drink too much at night. You, Cornelius, the poet started, have not put pen to paper for years. You, Humphrey, the artist, hung his head, have neither drawn nor painted anything since you came to live with me. I cannot make either of you work. I cannot retrieve the past. I cannot restore lost habits of industry. I cannot even make you feel your fall from the promise of your youth or remember the hopes of our father. What I can do is to check your intemperate habits by such means as are in my power. He stopped, they were trembling violently. Half of the £400 which you have drawn from Mr. Beck will be paid by household saving. Wine will disappear from my table. Brandy and soda will have to be bought at your own expense. I shall order the dinners, and I shall keep the key of the wine cellar. A year has passed. The twins have had a sad time. They look forward with undisguised eagerness to the return of the years of fatness. They have exhausted their own little income in purchasing the means for their midnight séances, and they have run up a frightful score at the Carnarvon Arms. But they still keep up bravely the pretense about their work. Chapter 44. So on the ruins he himself had made, sat Marius reft of all his former glory. Can you understand me, sir? Gabriel Cassilis sat in his own study. It was the day after the garden party. He slept through the night and in the morning rose and dressed as usual. Then he took his seat in his customary chair at his table. Before him lay papers, but he did not read them. He sat upright, his frock coat tightly buttoned across his chest, and rapped his knuckles with his gold eyeglasses as if he was thinking. They brought him breakfast and he took a cup of tea. Then he motioned them to take the things away. They gave him the Times and he laid it mechanically at his elbow, but he did not speak, nor did he seem to attend to what was done around him, and his eyes had a far-off look in them. Can you understand me, sir? The speaker was his secretary. He came in a cab, panting, eager to see if there was still any hope. Somehow or other it was whispered already in the city that Gabriel Cassilis had had some sort of stroke, and there was terrible news besides. Mr. Molel asked because there was something in his patron's face which frightened him. His eyes were changed. They had lost the keen sharp look which in a soldier means victory, in a scholar clearness of purpose, in a priest knowledge of human nature and ability to use that knowledge, in a financier the power and the intuition of success. That was gone. In its place an expression almost of childish softness. And another thing, the lips once set firm and close were parted now and mobile. The other things were nothing. That a man of 65 should in a single night become a man of 80, that the iron grey hair should become white, that a steady hand should shake and straight shoulders be bent. It was the look in his face, the far-off look, which made the secretary ask that question before he went on. Mr. Cassilis nodded his head gently. He could understand. You left the telegrams unopened for a week and more, cried the impatient clerk. Why, oh why, did you not let me open them? There was no reply. If I had known I could have acted. Even the day before yesterday I could have acted. The news came yesterday morning. It was all over the city by 3, and Eldorado's down to nothing in a moment. Mr. Cassilis looked a mild inquiry, no anxiety in that look at all. Eldorado won't pay up her interest, it's due next week. Nothing to pay it with. Your agent in New York telegraphed this a week ago. He's been confirming the secret every day since. Oh Lord, and you the only man who had the knowledge and all that stake in it. Can you speak, sir? For his master's silence was terrible to him. Listen then, 10 days ago Eldorado's went down after Wiley's pamphlet. You told him what to write and you paid him just as you did last year, but you tried to hide it from me. "That was wrong, sir. I've served you faithfully for 20 years, but never mind that. You bought in at 64, then the El Dorado minister wrote to the paper. Stock went up to 75. You stood to win only the day before yesterday, £260,000, more than £250,000. Yesterday, by 3 they were down to 16. This morning they are down to 8. And it's settling day and you lose your all. Oh, what a day, what a day." Still no complaint, not even a sigh from the patient man in the Windsor chair. Only that gentle tapping of the knuckles and that far-off look. The great name of Gabriel Cassilis dragged in the dust. All your reputation gone, the whole work of your life. Oh, sir, can't you feel even that? Can't you feel the dreadful end of it all? Gabriel Cassilis, the great Gabriel Cassilis, a lame duck. Not even that. The work of his life was forgotten with all its hopes, and the great financier, listening to his clerk with the polite impatience of one who listens to a wearisome sermon, was trying to understand what was the meaning of that black shadow which lay upon his mind and made him uneasy. For the rest, a perfect calm in his brain. People will say it was the shock of the El Dorado smash. Well, sir, it wasn't that, I know so much, but it's best to let people think so. If you haven't a penny left in the world, you have your character, and that's as high as ever. Fortunately, Mr. Mole went on, my own little savings were not in El Dorado stock, but my employment is gone, I suppose. You will recommend me, I hope, sir, and I do think that I've got some little reputation in the city. It was not for want of asserting himself that this worthy man failed, at any rate, of achieving his reputation. For 20 years he had magnified his office as confidential adviser of a great city light. Among his friends, and in his usual haunts, he successfully posed as one burdened with the weight of affairs, laden with responsibility, and at all times oppressed by the importance of his thoughts. He carried a pocket-book which shut with a clasp. In the midst of a conversation he would stop, become abstracted, rush at the pocket-book, so to speak, confide a jotting to its care, shut it with a snap, and then go on with a smile and an excuse. Some said that he stood in with Gabriel Cassilis, all thought that he shared his secrets and gave advice when asked for it. As a matter of fact, he was a clerk, and had always been a clerk. But he was a clerk who knew a few things which might have been awkward if told generally. He had a fair salary, but no confidence, no advice, and not much more real knowledge of what his chief was doing than any outsider. And in this tremendous smash, it was a great consolation to him to reflect that the liabilities represented an amount for which it was really a credit to fail. Mr. Mole has since got another place where the transactions are not so large, but perhaps his personal emoluments greater. In the evenings he will talk of the great failure. We stood to win, he will say, leaning back with a superior smile. We stood to win £260,000. We lost £1,250,000. I told him not to hang on too long. Against my advice he did. I remember, only 4 days before it happened, he said to me, Mole, my boy, he said, I've never known you wrong yet. But for once I fancy my own opinion. We've worked together for 20 years, he said, and you've the clearest head of any man I ever saw, he said. But here I think you're wrong, and I shall hold on for another day or two, he said. Little he knew what a day or two would bring forth, and he hasn't spoken since. Plays with his little boy and goes about in a bath chair. What a man he was, and what a pair, if I may say so, we made between us among the bulls and the bears. Dear me, dear me. It may be mentioned here that everything was at once given up. The house in Kensington Palace Gardens with its costly furniture, its carriages, plate, library and pictures. Mr. Cassilis signed whatever documents were brought for signature without hesitation, provided a copy of his own signature was placed before him. Otherwise he could not write his name. And never a single word of lamentation, reproach or sorrow. The past was and is still dead to him, all the past except one thing, and that is ever with him. For 60 years of his life, this man of the city, whose whole desire was to make money, to win in the game which he played with rare success and skill, regarded bankruptcy as the one thing to be dreaded, or at least to be looked upon, because it was absurd to dread it, as a thing bringing with it the whole of dishonor. Not to meet your engagements was to be in some sort a criminal. And now he was proclaimed as one who could not meet his engagements. If he understood what had befallen him, he did not care about it. The trouble was slight indeed in comparison with the other disaster. The honor of his wife and the legitimacy of his child, these were gone, and the man felt what it is that is greater than money gained or money lost. The blow which fell upon him left his brain clear while it changed the whole course of his thoughts and deprived him partially of memory. But it destroyed his power of speech. That rare and wonderful disease which seems to attack none but the strongest, which separates the brain from the tongue, takes away the knowledge and the sense of language, and kills the power of connecting words with things, while it leaves that of understanding what is said. The disease which doctors call aphasia was upon Mr. Gabriel Cassilis. In old men this is an incurable disease. Gabriel Cassilis will never speak again. He can read, listen, and understand, but he can frame no words with his lips nor write them with his hand. He is a prisoner who has free use of his limbs. He is separated from the world by a greater gulf than that which divides the blind and the deaf from the rest of us, because he cannot make known his thoughts, his wants, or his wishes. It took some time to discover what was the matter with him. Patients are not often found suffering from aphasia, and paralysis was the first name given to his disease. But it was very early found out that Mr. Cassilis understood all that was said to him, and by degrees they learned what he liked and what he disliked. Victoria Cassilis sat upstairs, waiting for something, she knew not what to happen. Her maid told her that Mr. Cassilis was ill. She made no reply, she did not ask to see him, she did not ask for any further news of him. She sat in her own room for 2 days, waiting. Then Joseph Jagnal asked if he might see her. She refused at first, but on hearing that he proposed to stay in the house till she could receive him, she gave way. He came from Lawrence, perhaps. He would bring her a message of some kind, probably a menace. "You have something to say to me, Mr. Jagnal." Her face was set hard, but her eyes were wistful. He saw that she was afraid. When a woman is afraid, you may make her do pretty well what you please. "I have a good deal to tell you, Mrs. Cassilis, and I am sorry to say it is of an unpleasant nature. I have heard," he went on, "from Mr. Colquhoun that you made a remarkable statement in the presence of Miss Fleming, and in the hearing of Mr. Cassilis." "Lawrence informed you correctly, I have no doubt," she replied coldly. "That statement of course was untrue," said Joseph, knowing that no record ever was more true, "and therefore I venture to advise." "On the part of Lawrence?" "In the name of Mr. Colquhoun, partly in your own interest." "Go on, if you please, Mr. Jagnal." "Believing that statement to be untrue," he repeated, "for otherwise I could not give this advice, I recommend to all parties concerned, silence. Your husband's paralysis is attributed to the shock of his bankruptcy." "His what?" cried Victoria, who had heard as yet nothing of the city disaster. "His bankruptcy. Mr. Cassilis is ruined." "Ruined Mr. Cassilis?" She was startled out of herself. Ruined, the thought of such disaster had never once crossed her brains. Ruined, that colossus of wealth, the man whom she married for his money, while secretly she despised his power of accumulating money. "He is ruined, Mrs. Cassilis, and hopelessly. I have read certain papers which he put into my hands this morning. It is clear to me that his mind has been for some weeks agitated by certain anonymous letters which came to him every day, and accused you, pardon me, Mrs. Cassilis, accused you of infidelity. The letters state that there is a secret of some kind connected with your former acquaintance with Mr. Colquhoun, that you have been lately in the habit of receiving him or meeting him every day, that you were in his chambers one evening when Mr. Cassilis called, with other particulars extremely calculated to excite jealousy and suspicion. Lastly, he was sent by the writer to Twickenham. The rest, I believe you know." She made no reply. "There can be no doubt, not the least doubt, that had your husband's mind been untroubled, this would never have happened. The disaster is due to his jealousy." "I could kill her," said Mrs. Cassilis, clenching her fist. "I could kill her." "Kill whom?" "The woman who wrote those letters. It was a woman. No man could have done such a thing. A woman's trick. Go on." "There is nothing more to say. How far other people are involved with your husband I cannot tell. I am going now into the city to find out if I can. Your wild words, Mrs. Cassilis, and your unguarded conduct have brought about misfortunes on which you little calculated. But I am not here to reproach you." "You are my husband's man of business, I suppose," she replied coldly, "a paid servant of his. What you say has no importance, nor what you think. What did Lawrence bid you tell me?" Joseph Jagnal's face clouded for a moment. But what was the good of feeling resentment with such a woman, and in such a miserable business? "You have 2 courses open to you," he went on. "You may, by repeating the confession you made in the hearing of Mr. Cassilis, draw upon yourself such punishment as the law, provided the confession be true, can inflict. That will be a grievous thing to you. It will drive you out of society and brand you as a criminal. It will lock you up for 2 years in prison. It will leave a stigma never to be forgotten or obliterated. It means ruin far, far worse than what you have brought on Mr. Cassilis. On the other hand, you may keep silence. This at least will secure the legitimacy of your boy, and will keep for you the amount settled on you at your marriage. But you may choose. If the statement you made is true, of course I can be no party to compounding a felony." "And Lawrence," she interposed, "what does Lawrence say?" "In any case, Mr. Colquhoun will leave England at once. He will marry that filly's girl. You may tell him," she hissed out, "that I will do anything and suffer anything rather than consent to his marrying her or anyone else. Mr. Colquhoun informs me further," pursued the crafty lawyer, "that, for some reason only known to himself, he will never marry during the life of a certain person. Phyllis Fleming will probably marry the Honourable Mr. Ronald Dunkirk." She buried her head in her hands, not to hide any emotion, for there was none to hide but to think. Presently she rose and said, "Take me to my husband, if you please." Joseph Jagnal, as a lawyer, is tolerably well versed in such wickedness and deceptions as the human heart is capable of. At the same time, he acknowledges to himself that the speech made by Victoria Cassilis to her husband, and the manner in which it was delivered, surpassed anything he had ever experienced or conceived. Gabriel Cassilis was sitting in an armchair near his table. In his arms was his infant son, a child of a year old, for whose amusement he was dangling a bunch of keys. The nurse was standing beside him. When his wife opened the door he looked up, and there crossed his face a sudden expression of such repulsion, indignation and horror, that the lawyer fairly expected the lady to give way altogether. But she did not. Then Mrs. Cassilis motioned the nurse to leave them, and Victoria said what she had come to say. She stood at the table, in the attitude of one who commands respect rather than one who entreats pardon. Her accentuation was precise, and her words as carefully chosen as if she had written them down first. But her husband held his eyes down, as if afraid of meeting her gaze. You would have called him a culprit waiting for reproof and punishment. "I learn today for the first time that you have suffered from certain attacks made upon me by an anonymous writer. I learn also for the first time, and to my great regret, that you have suffered in fortune as well as in health. I have myself been too ill in mind and body to be told anything. I am come to say at once that I am sorry if any rash words of mine have given you pain, or any foolish actions of mine have given you reason for jealousy. The exact truth is that Lawrence Colquhoun and I were once engaged. The breaking off of that engagement caused me at the time the greatest unhappiness. I resolved then that he should never be engaged to any other girl if I could prevent it by any means in my power. My whole action of late, which appeared to you as if I was running after an old lover, was the prevention of his engagement, which I determined to break off with Phyllis Fleming. In the heat of my passion I used words which were not true. They occurred to me at the moment. I said he was my husband. I meant to have said my promised husband. You now know, Mr. Cassilis, the whole secret. I am deeply humiliated in having to confess my revengeful spirit. I am punished in your affliction." Always herself, always her own punishment. "We can henceforth, I presume, Mr. Cassilis, resume our old manner of life." Mr. Cassilis made no answer, but he patted the head of his child, and Joseph Jagnal saw the tears running down his cheeks. For he knew that the woman lied to him. "For the sake of the boy, Mr. Cassilis," the lawyer pleaded, "let things go on as before." He made no sign. "Will you let me say something for you in the interests of the child?" He nodded. "Then, Mrs. Cassilis, your husband consents that there shall be no separation and no scandal, but it will be advisable for you both that there shall be as little intercourse as possible. Your husband will breakfast and dine by himself and occupy his own apartments. You are free, provided you live in the same house and keep up appearances, to do whatever you please, but you will not obtrude your presence upon your husband." Mr. Cassilis nodded again. Then he sought his dictionary and hunted for a word. It was the word he had first found, and was silence. "Yes, you will also observe strict silence on what has passed at Twickenham, here or elsewhere. Should that silence not be observed, the advisers of Mr. Cassilis will recommend such legal measures as may be necessary." Again Gabriel Cassilis nodded. He had not once looked up at his wife since that first gaze, in which he concentrated the hatred and loathing of his speechless soul. "Is that all?" asked Victoria Cassilis, "or have we more arrangements?" "That is all, madam," said Joseph, opening the door with great ceremony. She went away as she had come, with cold haughtiness. Nothing seemed to touch her, not her husband's misery, not his ruin, not the sight of her child. One thing only pleased her. Lawrence Colquhoun would not marry during her lifetime. Bah, she would live 100 years and he should never marry at all. In her own room was her maid. "Tomlinson," said Mrs. Cassilis, In spite of her outward calm, her nerves were strung to the utmost, and she felt that she must speak to someone. Tomlinson, if a woman wrote anonymous letters about you, if those letters brought misery and misfortune, what would you do to that woman? I do not know, ma'am, said Tomlinson, whose cheeks grew white. I will kill her, Tomlinson, I will kill her. I will get those letters and prove the handwriting and find that woman out. I will devote my life to it, and I will have no mercy on her when I have found her. I will kill her, somehow, by poison, by stabbing somehow. Don't tremble, woman, I don't mean you. And Tomlinson, forget what I have said. Tomlinson could not forget. She tottered from the room, trembling in every limb. The wretched maid had her revenge, in full and overflowing measure, and yet she was not satisfied. The exasperating thing about revenge is that it never does satisfy, but leaves you at the end as angry as at the beginning. Your enemy is crushed. You have seen him tied to a stake, as is the pleasant wont of the Red Indian, and stick arrows, knives, and red-hot things into him. These hurt so much that he is glad to die, but he is dead, and you can do no more to him, and it seems a pity, because if you had kept him alive, you might have thought of other and more dreadful ways of revenge. These doubts will occur to the most revenge-satiated Christian, and they lead to self-reproach. After all, one might just as well forgive a fellow at once. Mrs. Cassilis was a selfish and heartless woman. All the harm that was done to her was the loss of her great wealth. And what had her husband done to Tomlinson that he should be stricken? And what had others done who were involved with him in the great disaster? Tomlinson was so terrified, however, by the look which crossed her mistress's face, that she went away that very evening, pretended to have received a telegram from Liverpool. When she got there, wrote for boxes and wages, with a letter in somebody else's writing for a reason to her mistress, and then went to America, where she had relations. She lives now in a city of the Western States where her brother keeps a store. She is a leader in her religious circle, and I think that if she were to see Victoria Cassilis by any accident in the streets of that city, she would fly again, and to the farthest corners of the earth. So much for revenge, and I do hope that Tomlinson's example will be laid to heart, and pondered by other ladies' maids whose mistresses are selfish and sharp-tempered. Chapter 45. Farewell to all my greatness. The last day of Gilead Beck's wealth. He rose as unconscious of his doom as that frolicsome kid whose destiny brought the tear to Delia's eye. Had he looked at the papers, he would at least have ascertained that Gabriel Cassilis was ruined, but he had a rooted dislike to newspapers, and never looked at them. He classed the editor of the Times with Mr. Huggins of Clearville, or Mr. Van Cott of Chicago, but supposed that he had a larger influence. Politics he despised, criticism was beyond him, with social matters he had no concern, and it would wound the national self-respect were he to explain how carelessly he regarded matters which to Londoners seem of world-wide importance. On this day Gilead rose early because there was a good deal to look after. His breakfast was fixed for 11, a real breakfast. At 6 he was dressed, and making in his mind's eye the arrangements for seating his guests. Mr. and Mrs. Cassilis, Mrs. L'Estrange and Phillies, Lawrence Colquhoun, lads, and Jack Dunkirk, all his most intimate friends were coming. He had also invited the twins, but a guilty conscience made them send an excuse. They were now sitting at home, sober by compulsion and in great wretchedness, as has been seen. The breakfast was to be held in the same room in which he once entertained the men of genius, but the appointments were different. Gilead Beck now went in for flowers, to please the ladies. Flowers in June do not savour of ostentation, also for fruit. Strawberries, apricots, cherries and grapes in early June are not things quite beyond precedent, and his conscience acquitted him of display which might seem shoddy. And when the table was laid with its flowers and fruit, and dainty cold dishes garnished with all sorts of pretty things, it was, he felt, a work of art which reflected the highest credit on himself and everybody concerned. Gilead Beck was at great peace with himself that morning. He was resolved on putting into practice at once some of those schemes which the Golden Butterfly demanded as loudly as it could whisper. He would start that daily paper which should be independent of commercial success, have no advertisements, boil down the news, do without long leaders, and always speak the truth, without evasion, equivocation, suppression, or exaggeration, a miracle in journalism. He would run the great national drama which should revive the ancient glories of the stage, and for the rest he would be guided by circumstances, and when a big thing had to be done, he would step in with his pile, and do that big thing by himself. There was in all this perhaps a little overrating the power of the pile, but Gilead Beck was, after all, only human. Think what an inflation of dignity, brother de Pauperettegins, would follow in your own case on the acquisition of £1,500 a day. Another thing pleased our Gilead. He knew that in his own country the difficulty of getting into what he felt to be the best society would be insuperable. The society of Shadi, the companionship with the quickly grown rich, and the friendship of the gilded bladder are in the reach of every wealthy man. But Gilead was a man of finer feelings. He wanted more than this. He wanted the friendship of those who were born in the purple of good breeding. In New York he could not have got this. In London he did get it. His friends were ladies and gentlemen. They not only tolerated him but they liked him. They were people to whom he could give nothing, but they courted his society, and this pleased him more than any other part of his grand luck. There was no great merit in their liking the man. Rude as his life had been, he was gifted with the tenderest and kindest heart. Lowly born and roughly bred, he was yet a man of boundless sympathies, and because he had kept his self-respect throughout and was ashamed of nothing, he slipped easily and naturally into the new circle, picking up without difficulty what was lacking of external things. Yet he was just the same as when he landed in England, with the same earnest, almost solemn, way of looking at things, the same gravity, the same twang which marked his nationality. He affected nothing and pretended nothing. He hid nothing and was ashamed of nothing. He paraded nothing and wanted to be thought no other than the man he was, the ex-miner, ex-adventurer, ex-everything, who by a lucky stroke hit upon Isle and was living on the profits, and perhaps in all the world there was no happier man than Gilead Beck on that bright June morning, which was to be the last day of his grandeur. A purling stream of content murmured and babbled hymns of praise in his heart. He had no fears, his nerves were strong, he expected nothing but a continuous flow of prosperity and happiness. The first to arrive was Jack Dunkirk. Now if this youth had read the papers he would have been able to communicate some of the fatal news, but he had not, because he was full of fillies, and if any rumour of the El Dorado collapse smote his ears, it smote them unnoticed, because he did not connect El Dorado with Gilead Beck. What did it matter to this intolerably selfish young man how many British speculators lost their money by the El Dorado smash when he was going to meet fillies? After all, the round world, and all that is therein do really rotate about a pole of course invisible, which goes through every man's own centre of gravity, and sticks out in a manner which may be felt by him. And the reason why men have so many different opinions is, I am persuaded, this extraordinary, miraculous, multitudinous, simultaneous revolution of the earth upon her million axes. Enough for Jack that fillies was coming, fillies, whom he had not seen since the discovery, more memorable to him than any made by traveller or physicist, of the coping stone. Jack came smiling and bounding up the stairs with agile spring, a good half-hour before the time. Perhaps fillies might be before him, but she was not. Then came lads. Gilead Beck saw that there was some trouble upon him, but forbore to ask him what it was. He bore his heavy inscrutable look, such as that with which he had been wont to meet gambling losses, untoward telegrams from Newmarket, and other buffetings of fate. Then came a letter from Mrs. Cassilis. Her husband was ill and therefore she could not come. Then came a letter from Lawrence Culquhoun. He had most important business in the city, and therefore he could not come. Seems like the wedding feast, said Gilead irreverently. He was a little disconcerted by the defection of so many guests, but he had a leaf taken out of the table, and cheerfully waited for the remaining two. They came at last, and I think the hearts of all three leaped within them at sight of Phyllis's happy face. If it was sweet before, when Jack first met her, with the mysterious look of childhood on it, it was far sweeter now with the bloom and blush of conscious womanhood, the modest light of maidenly joy with which she met her lover. Jack rushed, so to speak, at her hand, and held it with a ridiculous shamelessness only excusable on the ground that they were almost in a family circle. Then Phyllis shook hands with Gilead Beck, with a smile of gratitude which meant a good deal more than preliminary thanks for the coming breakfast. Then it came to Lads's turn. He turned very red, I do not know why, and whispered in his deepest bass. Know all about it, lucky beggar Jack, wish you happiness. Thank you, Captain Lads, Phyllis replied in her fearless fashion. I am very happy already, and so is Jack. Wanted yesterday, Lads went on in the same deep whisper, wanted yesterday to offer some slight token of regard, found I couldn't, no more money, El Dorado smash, all gone, locked in boxes, found ring, once my mother's. Will you accept it? Phyllis understood the ring, but she did not understand the rest of the speech. It was one of those old-fashioned rings set in pearls and brilliants. She was not by any means above admiring rings, and she accepted it with a cheerful alacrity. Sell up, Lads growled. Go away, do something, earn the daily crust. But I don't understand, she interrupted. Never mind, tell you after breakfast, tell you all presently. And then they went to breakfast. It was rather a silent party. Lads was, as might have been expected of a man who had lost his all, disposed to taciturnity. Jack and Phyllis were too happy to talk much. Agatha L'Estrange and the host had all the conversation to themselves. Agatha asked him if the dainty spread before them was the usual method of breakfast in America. Gilead Beck replied that of late years he had been accustomed to call a chunk of cold pork with a piece of bread a substantial breakfast, and that the same luxuries furnished him, as a rule, with dinner. The old life, he said, had its points, I confess. For those who love cold pork it was one long round of delirious joy, and there was always the future to look forward to. Now the future has come, I like it better. My experience, Mrs. L'Estrange, is that you may divide men into two classes, those who have got a future and those who haven't. I belong to the class who had a future. Sometimes we miss it, and I feel like to cry whenever I think of the boys with a bright future before them, who fell in the war at my side, not in tens but in hundreds. Sometimes we find it. I found it when I struck Isle. And always for those men, whether the future come early or whether it come late, it lies bright and shinin' before them, and so they never lose hope. And have women no future as well as men, Mr. Beck? Asked Phyllis. I don't know, Miss Fleming, but I hope you have. Before my golden butterfly came to me I was looking forward for my future, and I knew it was bound to come in some form or other. I looked forward for 30 years, my youth was gone when it came and half my manhood, but it is here. Perhaps, Mr. Beck, said Mrs. L'Estrange, who was a little rococo in her morality, it is well that this great fortune did not come to you when you were younger. You think that, madam? Perhaps it is so. To fool around New York would be a poor return for the luck of the butterfly. Yes, better as it is. Providence knows very well what to be about, it don't need prompting from us. And impatience is no manner of use, not the least use in the world. At the right time the luck comes, at the right time the luck will go. Yes, he looked solemnly round the table. Some day the luck is bound to go. When it goes, I hope I shall be prepared for the change. But if it goes tomorrow, it cannot take away, Mrs. L'Estrange, the memory of these few months, your friendship and yours, Miss Fleming. There's things which do not depend upon Isle, more things than I thought formerly, things which money cannot do. More than once I thought my pile ought to find it easy to do something useful before the time comes, but the world is a more tangled web than I used to think. There are always the poor among us, said the good Agatha. Yes, madam, that is true, and there always will be. More you give to the poor, more you make them poor. There's folks goin' up and folks goin' down. You in England help the folks goin' down, you make them fall easy. I want to help the folks goin' up. At this moment a telegram was brought for him. It was from his London bankers. They informed him that a cheque for a small sum had been presented, but that his balance was already overdrawn, and that they had received a telegram from New York on which they would be glad to see him. Gilead Beck read it and could not understand it. The cheque was for his own weekly account at the hotel. He laid the letter aside, and went on with his exposition of the duties and responsibilities of wealth. He pointed out to Mrs. L'Estrange, who alone listened to him. Jack was whispering to Phyllis, and Lads was absorbed in thoughts of his own. That when he arrived in London, he was possessed with the idea that all he had to do, in order to protect, benefit and advance humanity, was to found a series of institutions. That in the pursuit of this idea, he had visited and examined all the British institutions he could hear of, and that his conclusions were that they were all a failure. For, he concluded, what have you done? Your citizens need not save money, because a hospital, a church, an almshouse, a dispensary and a workhouse stand in every parish. They need not be moral, because there's homes for the repentant in every other street. All around they are protected by charity and the state. Even if they get knocked down in the street, they need not fight, because there's a policeman within easy hail. You breed your poor, Mrs. L'Estrange, and you take almighty care to keep them always with you. In my country he who can work and won't work goes to the wall. He starves, and a good thing too. Here he gets fat. Every way, he went on, you encourage your people to do nothing. Your clever young men get a handsome income for life, I am told, at Oxford and Cambridge if they pass one good examination. For us the examination is only the beginning. Your clergymen get a handsome income for life, whether they do their work or not. Ours have got to go on preachin' well and livin' well, else we want to know the reason why. You give your subalterns as much as other nations give their colonels. You set them down to a grand mess every day as if they were all born lords. You keep 4 times as many naval officers as you want, and 10 times as many generals. It's all waste and lavishin' from end to end, and as for your royal family, I reckon that I'd find a dozen families in Massachusetts alone who'd run the royal mill for a tenth of the money. I own they wouldn't have the same gracious manners," he added. "And your princess is, well, if Miss Fleming were princess, she couldn't do the part better. Perhaps gracious manners are worth paying for." Here another telegram was brought him. It was from New York. It informed him in plain and intelligible terms that his wells had all run dry, that his credit was exhausted, and that no more bills would be honored. He read this aloud with a firm voice and unfaltering eye. Then he looked round him and said solemnly, "The time has come. It's come a little sooner than I expected, but it has come at last." He was staggered, but he remembered something which consoled him. "At least," he said, "if the income is gone, the pile remains. That's close upon $500,000 of English money. We can do something with that. Mr. Cassilis has got it all for me." "Who?" cried lads eagerly. "Mr. Gabriel Cassilis, the great English financier." "He is ruined," said lads. "He has failed for £2,000,000, if your money is in his hands. Part of it, I believe, was in Eldorado stock. The Eldoradians cannot pay their interest, and the stock has sunk to nothing. Gabriel Cassilis has lost all my money in it, at least I have lost it on his recommendation." "Your money all gone, Tommy," cried Jack. "All Jack, lads, aromatic cocoa, fragrant, nutritious, no use now, business sold 20 years ago, proceeds sunk in Eldorado stock, nothing but the smell left." And while they were gazing in each other's face with mute bewilderment, a third messenger arrived with a letter. It was from Mr. Mole, the secretary. It informed poor Gilead that Mr. Gabriel Cassilis had drawn, in accordance with his power of attorney, upon him to the following extent. A bewildering mass of figures followed, at the bottom of which was the total: Gilead Beck's $2,000,000. That further, Gabriel Cassilis, always, it appeared, acting on the wishes of Mr. Beck, had invested the whole sum in Eldorado stock. That, and see, he threw the letter on the table half unread. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he rose solemnly, and sought the corner of the room in which stood the safe containing the emblem of his luck. He opened it, and took out the box of glass and gold which held it. This was covered with a case of green leather. He carried it to the table. They all crowded round while he raised the leathern cover and displayed the butterfly. "Has anyone," he lifted his head and looked helplessly round, "has anyone felt an earthquake?" For a strange thing had happened. The wings of the insect were lying on the floor of the box. The white quartz which formed its body had slipped from the gold wire which held it up, and the golden butterfly was in pieces. He opened the box with a little gold key, and took out the fragments of the two wings and the body. "Gone," he said, "broken. If this golden butterfly fall and break, farewell the luck of Gilead P. Beck." "Your own lines, Mr. Dunkirk. Broken into little bits it is. The isle run dry, the credit exhausted, and the pile fooled away." No one spoke. "I am sorry for you most, Mr. Dunkirk. I am powerful sorry, sir. I had hoped with the assistance of Miss Fleming to divide that pile with you. Now, sir, I've got nothing, not a red cent left to divide with a beggar. Mrs. L. Estrange," he went on, "those last words of mine were prophetic. When I am gone back to America, I suppose the odds and ends here will pay my passage. You'll remember that I said the luck would some day go." It was all so sudden, so incomprehensible, that no one present had a word to say, either of sympathy or of sorrow. Gilead Beck proceeded with his soliloquy. "I've had a real high time for 3 months, the best 3 months of my life. Whatever happens more can't touch the memory of the last 3 months. I've met English ladies and made friends of English gentlemen. There's American ladies and American gentlemen, but I can't speak of them, because I never went into their society. You don't find ladies and gentlemen in Empire City. And in all the trades I've turned my attention to, from school-keeping to editing, there's not been one where American ladies cared to show their hand. That means that the Stars and Stripes may be as good as the Union Jack, come to know them." He stopped and pulled himself together with a laugh. "I can't make it out somehow. Seems as if I'm in a dream. Is it real? Is the story of the golden butterfly a true story, or is it made up out of some man's brain?" "It is real, Mr. Beck," said Phyllis, softly putting her hand in his. "It is real. No one could have invented such a story. See, dear Mr. Beck, you that we all love so much, there is you in it, and I am in it, and the twins. Why, if people saw us all in a book they would say it was impossible. I am the only girl in all the civilized world who can neither read nor write, and Jack doesn't mind it, and you are the only man who ever found the golden butterfly. Indeed, it is all real." "It is all real, Beck," Jack echoed. You have had the high time, and sorry indeed we are that it is over, but perhaps it is not all over. Surely something out of the $2 million must have remained. Mr. Beck pointed sorrowfully to the 3 pieces, which were the fragments of the butterfly. Nothing is left, he said. Nothing except the solid gold that made his cage, and that will go to pay the hotel bill. Mrs. Lestrange looked on in silence. What was this quiet lady, this woman of even and uneventful life, to say in the presence of such misfortune? Lads held out his hand. Worth 20 of any of us, he said. We are in the same boat. And you too, Captain Lads, Gilead cried. It is worse than my own misfortune because I am a rough man and can go back to the rough life. No, Mrs. Lestrange, no, my dear young lady, I can't, not with the same light heart as before. You've spoiled me. I must strike out something new, away from Empire City and Isle and gold. I'm spoiled. It's not the cold chunk of pork that I'm afraid of, it is the beautiful life and the sweetness that I'm going to lose. I said I hoped I should be prepared to meet the fall of my luck when it came, but I never thought it would come like this. Stay with us, Mr. Beck, said Phyllis. Don't go back to the old life. Stay with us, said Jack. We will all live together. Do not leave us, Mr. Beck, said Mrs. Lestrange. Women can blush although they may be past 40. Stay here with your friends. He looked from one to the other, and something like a tear glittered in his eye, but he shook his head. Then he took up the wings of the butterfly, the pretty golden lamine cut in the perfect shape of a wing, marked and veined by nature as if, for once she was determined to show that she too could be an artist and imitate herself. They lay in her hands, and he looked fondly at them. What shall I do with these? He said softly. They have been very good to me, they have given me the pleasantest hours of my life, they have made me dream of power as if I was autocrat of all the Russians. Say, Mrs. Lestrange, since my chief pleasure has come through Mr. Dunkirk, may I offer the broken butterfly to Miss Fleming? He laid the wings before her with a sweet sad smile. Jack took them up and looked at them. In the white quartz were the little holes where the wings had fitted. He put them back in their old place, the wings in the quartz. They fitted exactly, and in a moment the butterfly was as it had always been. Jack deftly bent round it again the golden wire which held it to the golden flower. Singular to relate, the wire fitted like the wings just the same as before, and the butterfly vibrated on its perch again. It's wonderful, cried Gilead Beck. It's the luck I've given away. It's gone to you, Miss Fleming, but it won't take the form of Isle. Then take it back, Mr. Beck, cried Phyllis. No, young lady, the luck left me of its own accord. That was shown when the butterfly fell off the wires. It is yours now, yours, and you will make a better use of it. I think, he went on with his hand upon the golden case, I think there's a luck in the world which I never dreamed of, a better luck than Isle. Mrs. Lestrange, you know what sort of luck I mean. Yes, Mr. Beck, I know, she replied. Phyllis laid her hands on Jack's shoulder, while his arm stole round her waist. It is love, Mr. Beck, said the girl. Yes, that is the best luck in all the world, and I am sure of it. Jack stooped and kissed her. The simplicity and innocence of this maiden went to Gilead Beck's heart. They were a religion to him, an education. In the presence of that guileless heart all earthly thoughts dropped from his soul, and he was, like the girl before him, pure in heart and clean in memory. That is indeed the sweet enchantment of innocence, a bewitchment out of which we need never awake unless we like. Take the case and all, Miss Fleming, said Gilead Beck. But she would not have the splendid case with its thick plate glass and solid gold pillars. Then Gilead Beck brought out the little wooden box, the same in which the golden butterfly lay when he ran from the bear on the slopes of the Sierra Nevada. And Phyllis laid her new treasure in the cotton wool and slung the box by its steel chain round his neck, laughing in a solemn fashion. While they talked thus sadly, the door opened and Lawrence Culquehound stood before them. Agatha cried out when she saw him because he was transformed. The lazy, insouciant look was gone, a troubled look was in its place. Worse than a troubled look, a look of misery, a look of self-reproach, a look as of a criminal brought to the bar and convicted. Lawrence, cried Mrs. Lestrange. He came into the room in a helpless sort of way, his hands shaking before him like those of some half-blind old man. Phyllis, he said in hoarse voice, forgive me. What have I to forgive, Lawrence? Forgive me, he repeated humbly. Nay, you do not understand. Dunkirk, it is for you to speak, for all of you, you all love Phyllis. Agatha, you love her, you used to love me too. How shall I tell you? I think we guessed, said Gilead. I did it for the best, Phyllis. I thought to double your fortune. Cassilis said I should double it. I thought to double my own. I put all your money, child, every farthing of your money in El Dorado stock by his advice, and all my own too. And it is all gone, every penny of it gone. Jack Dunkirk clasped Phyllis tighter by the hand. She only laughed. Why, Lawrence, she said, what if you have lost all my money? Jack doesn't care, do you, Jack? No, darling, no, said Jack. And at the moment, such was the infatuation of this young man, he really did not care. Lawrence, said Agatha, you acted for the best. Don't, dear Lawrence, don't trouble too much. Captain Lads has lost all his fortune too, and Mr. Beck has lost all his, and we are all ruined together. All ruined together, echoed Gilead Beck, looking at Mrs. L. Estrange. Gabriel Cassilis is a wonderful man. I always said he was a wonderful man. In the evening the three ruined men sat together in Gilead's room. Nothing saved Colquhoun? Asked Lads after a long pause. Nothing, the stock was 70 when I bought in, 70 at 10%. It is now anything you like, 4, 6, 8, 16, what you please, because no one will buy it. Well, said Gilead Beck, it does seem rough on us all, and perhaps it's rougher on you too than it is on me. But to think, only to think, that such an almighty pile should be fooled away on a darned half-caste state like El Dorado, and for all of us to believe Mr. Gabriel Cassilis a whole-souled, high-toned speculator. Once I thought, he continued, that we Amicans must be the 10 tribes, because I said nobody but one out of the 10 tribes would get such a providential lift as the golden butterfly. Gentlemen, my opinions are changed since this morning. I believe we're nothing better, not a single cent better, than one of the kicked-out tribes. I may be an Amalekite or I may be a Hivite, but I'm darned if I ever call myself again one of the children of Abraham. Chapter the last. Whisper love, ye breezes, sigh. In love's content, soft air of morn. Let eve in brighter sunsets die, and day with brighter dawn be born. It is a week since the disastrous day. Gilead Beck has sold the works of art with which he intended to found his grand national collection. He has torn up his great schemes for a national theatre, a grand national paper. He has ceased to think, for the delectation of the golden butterfly, about improving the human race. His gratitude to that prodigy of nature has so far cooled that he now considers it more in the light of a capricious sprite, a sort of Robin Goodfellow, than as a benefactor. He has also changed his views as to the construction of the round earth, and all that is therein. Isle, he says, may be found by other lucky adventures, but Isle is not to be depended on for a permanence. He would now recommend those who strike Isle to make their pile as quickly as may be, and devote all their energies to the safety of that pile. And as to the human race, it may slide. What's the good, he says to Jack Dunkirk, of helping up those that are bound to climb? Let them climb. And what's the good of trying to save those that are bound to fall? Let them fall. I'm down myself, but I mean to get up again. It is sad to record that Mr. Burles, the picture dealer, refused to buy back again the great picture of Sisera and Yale. No one would purchase the work at all. Mr. Beck offered it to the Langham Hotel as a gift. The directors firmly declined to accept it. When it was evident that this remarkable effort of genius was appreciated by no one, Gilead Beck resolved on leaving it where it was. It is rumored that the manager of the hotel bribed the owner of a certain Regent Street restaurant to take it away, and I have heard that it now hangs, having been greatly cut down, on the wall of that establishment, getting its tones mellowed day by day with the steam of roast and boiled. As for the other pictures, Mr. Burles expressed his extreme sorrow that temporary embarrassment prevented him purchasing them back at the price given for them. He afterwards told Mr. Beck that the unprincipled picture dealer who did ultimately buy them, at the price of so much a square foot, and as second-rate copies, was a disgrace to his honourable profession. He said, stood high in public estimation for truth, generosity and fair dealing. None but genuine works came from his own establishment, and what he called a gruse was a gruse and nothing but a gruse. As for the pile, Gilead's power of attorney had effectually destroyed that. There was not a cent left, not one single coin to rub against another. All was gone in that great crash. He called upon Gabriel Cassilis. The financier smiled upon him with his newly born air of sweetness and trust, but as we have seen, he could no longer speak, and there was nothing in his face to express sorrow or repentance. Gilead found himself, when all was wound up, the possessor of that single cheque which Joseph Jagnal had placed in his hands, and which, most fortunately for himself, he had not paid into the bank. £400. With that at 45 he was to begin the world again. After all, the majority of mankind at 45 have much less than £400. He heard from Canada that the town he had built, the whole of which belonged to him, was deserted again. There was a quicker rush out of it than into it. It stands there now, more lonely than Empire City, its derricks and machinery rusting and dropping to pieces, the houses empty and neglected, the land relapsing into its old condition of bog and marsh. But Gilead Beck will never see it again. He kept away from Twickenham during this winding up and settlement of affairs. It was a week later when, his mind at rest and his conscience clear of bills and doubts, because now there was nothing more to lose, he called at the house where he had spent so many pleasant hours. Mrs. L'Estrange received him. She was troubled in look, and the traces of tears were on her face. "It is a most unfortunate time," Gilead said sympathetically, "a most unfortunate time." "Blow after blow, Mr. Beck," Agatha sobbed, "stroke upon stroke." "That is so, madam. They've got the knife well in this time, and when they give it a twist we're bound to cry out. You've thought me selfish, I know, not to inquire before." "No, Mr. Beck, no. It is only too kind of you to think of us in your overwhelming disaster. I have never spent so wretched a week. Poor Lawrence has literally not a penny left except what he gets from the sale of his horses, pictures and things. Captain Ladd's is the same. Philly's has no longer a farthing, and now, oh dear, I am going to lose her altogether. But when she marries Mr. Dunkirk you will see her often." "No, haven't they told you? Jack has got almost nothing, only £10,000 altogether, and they have made up their minds to emigrate. They are going to Virginia, where Jack will buy a small estate." "Is that so?" asked Gilead meditatively. "Lawrence says that he and Captain Ladd's will go away together somewhere, perhaps back to Empire City. And you will be left alone, you Mrs. L'Estrange, all alone in this country and ruined. It mustn't be." He straightened himself up and looked round the room. "It must not be, Mrs. L'Estrange. You know me partly. That is, you know the manner of man I wish to seem and try to be. You know what I have been. You do not know, because you cannot guess, the things which you have put into my head." Mrs. L'Estrange blushed and began to tremble. Could it be possible that he was actually going to? He was. "You and I together, Mrs. L'Estrange, are gone to wreck in this almighty hurricane. I've got $1,000 or $2,000 left. Perhaps you will have as much, perhaps not. Mrs. L'Estrange, you will think it presumptuous in a rough American, not an American gentleman by birth and raising, to offer you such protection and care as he can give to the best of women. We too will go to Virginia with Mr. Dunkirk and his wife. We will settle near them and watch their happiness. The Virginians are a kindly folk, and love the English people, especially if they are of gentle birth. Say, Mrs. L'Estrange." "Oh, Mr. Beck, I am 40 years of age." "And I am 45." Just then Phyllis and Jack burst into the room. They did not look at all like being ruined. They were wild with joy and good spirits. "And you are going to Virginia, Mr. Dunkirk," said Gilead. "I am thinking of going too, if I can persuade this lady to go with me." "Oh, Agatha, come with us." "Come with me," corrected Gilead. Then Phyllis saw how things lay. What a change in Phyllis to see so much. And half laughing, but more in seriousness than in mirth, threw her arms round Agatha's neck. "Will you come, dear Agatha? He is a good man and he loves you, and we will all live near together and be happy." 3 short scenes to conclude my story. It is little more than a year since Agatha L'Estrange, as shy and blushing as any maiden, much more shy than Phyllis, laid her hand in Gilead's with the confession half sobbed out, "And it isn't a mistake you are making, because I am not ruined at all. It is only you and these poor children and Lawrence. We are back again to Empire City. It is the early fall, September. The yellow leaves clothe all the forests with brown and gold. The sunlight strikes upon the peaks and ridges of the Great Sierra, lights up the broad belt of wood making shadows blacker than night, and lies along the grass-grown streets of the deserted Empire City. 2 men in hunting dress are making their way slowly through the grass and weeds that choke the pathway. "Don't like it, Colquhoun," says one, more ghostly than ever. They push on, and presently the foremost lads starts back with a cry. "What is it?" asks Colquhoun. They push aside the brambles and behold a skeleton. The body has been on its knees, but now only the bones are left. They are clothed in the garb of the celestial, and one side of the skull is broken in, as if with a shot. "It must be my old friend Achow," said Colquhoun calmly. "See, he's been murdered." "In the dead of night, lads," awakened Colquhoun. "Can't help it," he said. "Very sorry, ghosts walking about the stairs," says the ghost of Achow to the shade leeching. "Know your picey pigeon Mackie shoody me." Don't like ghosts, Colquhoun. Next morning they left Empire City. Lads was firm in the conviction that he had heard and seen a Chinaman's ghost, and was resolute against stopping another night in the place. Just outside the town they made another discovery. Good Lord, cried Lads, frightened out of sobriety of speech. It rains skeletons, look there, he's beckoning. And to be sure, before them was raised, with finger as of invitation, a skeleton hand. This too belonged to a complete assortment of human bones clad in Chinese dress. By its side lay a rusty pistol. Lawrence picked it up. By gad, he said, it's the same pistol I gave to Leeching. How do you read this story, Lads? Lads sat down and replied slowly. He said that he never did like reading ghost stories, and since the apparition of the murdered Chow the night before, he should like them still less. Ghost stories, he said, are all very well until you come to see and hear a ghost. Now that he had a ghost story of his own, an original one in pidgin English, he did not intend ever to read another. Therefore Colquhoun must excuse him if he gave up the story of Leeching's skeleton entirely to his own reading. He then went on to say that he never had liked skeletons, and that he believed Empire City was nothing but a mouldy old churchyard without the church, while as a cemetery, it wasn't a patch upon Highgate. And the mention of Highgate, he said, reminded him of Phillies, and he proposed they should both get to Virginia and call upon Jack and his wife. All this took time to explain, and meanwhile Lawrence was poking the butt end of his gun about in the grass to see if there was anything more. There was something more. It was a bag of coarse yellow canvas, tied by a string round what had been the waist of a man. Lawrence cut the string and opened the bag. We're in luck, Tommy, look at this. It was the gold so laboriously scraped together by the two Chinamen, which had caused in a manner the death of both. Lift it, Tommy. Colquhoun grew excited at his find. Lift it, there must be 150 ounces, I should think. It will be worth 400 or 500 pounds. Here's a find. To this pair, who had only a year ago chucked away their thousands, the luck of picking up a bag of gold appeared something wonderful. Tommy, said Colquhoun, I tell you what we will do. We will add this little windfall to what Beck would call your little pile and my little pile. And we'll go and buy a little farm in Virginia too, and we will live there close to Jack and Phillies. Agatha will like it too, and there's capital shooting. Gabriel Cassilis and his wife reside at Brighton. The whole of the great fortune being lost, they have nothing but Victoria's settlement. That gives them a small income. Enough to subsist upon, Victoria tells her friends. The old man, he looks very old and fragile now, is wheeled about in a chair on sunny days. When he is not being wheeled about, he plays with his child, to whom he talks. That is, pours out a stream of meaningless words, because he will never again talk coherently. Victoria is exactly the same as ever, cold, calm and proud. Nor is there anything whatever in her manner to her husband, if she accidentally meets him, to show that she has the slightest sorrow, shame or repentance for the catastrophe she brought about. Joseph Jagnell is working the great Dysonwell case for them, and is confident that he will get the testator's intentions, which can now be only imperfectly understood, set aside, when Gabriel Cassilis will once more become comparatively wealthy. On a veranda in sunny Virginia, Agatha Beck sits quietly working and crooning some old song in sheer content and peace of heart. Presently she lifts her head as she hears a step. That smile with which she greets her husband shows that she is happy in her new life. Gilead Beck is in white with a broad straw hat because it is in hot September. In his hand he has a letter. Good news, wife, good news, he says. Jack and Phillies are coming here today and will stay till Monday. Will be here almost as soon as the note. Baby coming too. Of course, Gilead, says Agatha, smiling superior, as if the dear girl would go anywhere without her little Philip, and 6 weeks old tomorrow. Everybody who has appreciated how very far from clever Jack Dunkirk was, will be prepared to hear that he committed an enormous etymological blunder in the baptism of his boy, whom he named Philip, in the firm belief that Philip was the masculine form of Phillies. Here they comes, here they are. Jack comes rattling up to the house in his American trap, jumps out, throws the reins to the boy and hands out his wife with the child. Kisses and greetings. Phillies seems at first unchanged, except perhaps that the air of Virginia has made her sweet delicacy of features more delicate. Yet look again, and you find that she is changed. She was a child when we saw her first, then we saw her grow into a maiden. She is a wife and a mother now. She whispers her husband, All right, Phil dear. Beck, you've got to shut your eyes for just 1 minute. No, turn your back so, now you may look. Phillies has hung round the neck of her unconscious baby by a golden chain, the golden butterfly. It seems as strong and vigorous as ever, and as it lies upon the child's white dress, it looks as if it were poised for a moment's rest, but ready for flight. That insect, said Gilead sentimentally. Well, it's given me the best thing that a man can get. He took the hand of his wife, love and friendship. You are welcome, fillies, to all the rest, provided that all the rest does not take away these. Nay, she said, her eyes filling with the gentle dew of happiness and content. I have all that I want for myself. I have my husband and my boy, my little Philip. I am more than happy, and so I give to tiny Phil all the remaining luck of the golden butterfly. The end.